take me to the back to get hooked up to an IV for the procedure, and hours pass with absolutely no word from the nurses.
Nice.
And let me tell you something about IVs. They're freaking cold. Not something you want to be hooked up to for hours on end. And get this, the nurse who initially stuck me with the needle actually broke the metal tip in my arm while searching for a vein. Ugh. So anyway, I'm freezing to death and alone for hours in this seemingly abandoned urinary hospital with a constant flow of ice water in my veins. So I inevitably have to go to the bathroom. And there wasn't a soul around, so I had to stumble along through the halls, dragging my IV with me until I found one. And just try to imagine what the unisex bathrooms look like in a urinary hospital.
Oh god.
There was piss absolutely everywhere! Except the toilet. Like, it was on the walls, in the sink, the little trash can, the soap dispenser! So I'm trying to piss in a bucket while my numb fingers feel like icy forceps on my little friend downstairs, and at least I had a bit more luck than the average Joe who was trapped in this place at hitting my target. And eventually I made my way back and met up with the anesthesiologist. They signed some papers for a second and piss right off. Another hour later, I am finally wheeled back into the room where I met a completely different person claiming to be my anesthesiologist. And the last words I hear before getting gassed out by this senile dinosaur are,
"Hello, Alex. I'm your anesthesiologist. I need you to take deep breaths and count backwards from 10.
And all I'm thinking is, oh my god, I'm gonna die with a camera in my pee hole!
Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon. This isn't nearly as good as the first game.
Now luckily I don't get too nauseous with anesthetics, cause the next thing I knew I was being jerked upright and twisted around by a nurse, who then threw a bag on me with my clothes telling me I gotta hurry and leave to make room for the next patient, cause apparently they were a little behind.
Why did it take Nintendo 10 years to realize they should have just called this game 2?
So I fumble upward and sloppily yank my clothes back on, just seconds from coming to, and get pushed, and I mean pushed, out the hallway and towards the door in the back, opening out into the street where my ride was waiting for me. They opened the car door and I collapse on the back seat, face first, still half asleep. I somehow managed to tuck in my feet and shut the door behind me so we could go.
I don't even see how a Switch remaster can turn this into a passable sequel. This game's a mess. Oh, where do I even start?
Now that drugged up car ride was something else.
Just like Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, this game is disjointedly sectioned into dozens of short mission-based levels instead of actually allowing players to openly explore the Metroid-style mansion, defeating bosses and unlocking the path forward themselves.
The voices in my head were telling me strange things like macarons or tiny alien spaceships disguising as desserts. Tobey Maguire was actually the best Spider-Man, and most importantly, it feels like there's a drill bit shoved in my pee hole!
The original game was a super creative experiment with an engaging world full of expressive, unique, and fun boss and enemy encounters, but not a single one of this game's plastic, generic, haunted house encounters felt anywhere near as endearing.
Time is a Fruit Loop and we are all the milk. It's like I ripped off my pants for a dramatic effect, but I forgot I wasn't wearing any underwear!
Mechanically, all that's changed, aside from the sanding down of the game's personality and segmenting every 10 steps into immersion-breaking missions, is the strobe bulb. Ghosts no longer get stunned by your flashlight, so now you've gotta charge a strobe before blinding them and sucking them up. Why'd they change this? That's a good question.
Frisbee balls and noodle flakes. Can somebody explain to me why I feel like I just left the castration station and why there's spaghetti on my voicemail?
Also, whose bright idea was it to incorporate awkward motion controls for aiming absolutely everything with no way to turn it off?
The sirens in my brain never stop blaring, so I'm living it up in Hotel Castlevania, photoshopping Gordon Ramsay's face on ducks.
I guess I'm just on my own today.
But what do the Spice Girls actually taste like? Commodore Smegma? Pasteurized McBathroom soap?
I know the 3DS doesn't have the horsepower to keep up with the GameCube, but boy does the heavy pixelation make this game look lousy.
So coming to, we stopped for some food on the way home because we're all starving. It should have been our breakfast, but ended up being our dinner, courtesy to my half-a-day-long procedure. Sure, I was freaking hungry, but I still had 4 gallons of ice water in my veins, so I had to drain the floodgates before sitting down.
Sure, the 3D makes it look loads better, but that doesn't change the fact that the Dark Moon itself is 24 polys.
You ever get salt and vinegar potato chips in a fresh wound and it just stings like heck? Well, imagine that, but instead you're fighting back a relentless stream of what feels like hydrochloric acid through your penis!
Instead of unique portrait ghosts, this game is just filled with smiley face goofy jelly beans. There's not even that many types, and you'll be dealing with the same bland booger muffins for the entire game.
The pain is so excruciating you can't even scream. Time and space melt away as you drift above your body and tap into the very fabric of the universe. You feel the centrifugal force of the earth beneath your feet gently lifting you up into the greater cosmos.
Luigi's Mansion was so amazing because it had so much personality, but the sequel feels like it was under a court mandate to be as expressionless as humanly possible.
Snapping back to reality, I came to the painful realization that I only managed to dribble a couple little drops.
The only surprise this game has in store for you is that there are actually 5 mansions you'll be exploring this time, but considering the game's no longer open to exploration, it adds up to absolutely nothing. Nintendo went and even blatantly spoiled this in their own trailer for the game, so I assume you already know that, and there are no surprises left for you in this goofy haunted house game.
I just wanna pee!
The story begins with Luigi just trying to take a nap when he is suddenly digitized, sucked in through his TV, reconstructed, and spat out in Professor Egaz's laboratory. This isn't some noble quest to save his brother, it's just blatant kidnapping.
So there I am, washing my hands, and I hear the door open and shut. Looking around, I don't see anybody. This isn't a big bathroom where I might just miss someone. There's literally one stall, one urinal, and a sink.
Professor Egad tells Luigi he needs his help because apparently King Boo shattered something called the Dark Moon, which caused all of the friendly Squishmallows working for him to go ballistic. You heard me right. The helpful ghosts turned evil because the Dark Moon got destroyed. I don't get it either.
Starting to question my own senses, I come to the realization that I still have to pee. So I scoot over to the urinal and fruitlessly give that lovely experience another go, when suddenly I hear the door open again behind me, and this time I check and see a man looking in at me before shutting the door without entering. And now I'm suddenly terrified.
Not sure why Egad enslaved an army of undead spirits after what happened last time he so much as tried to display them as portraits, but either way he pretty much forces Luigi to do his dirty work for him, capturing ghosts in 5 overrun haunted madhouses in hopes of restoring the fragments of the Dark Moon.
What does this guy want? There's clearly room for him to use the stall or wash his hands if he wanted. Why is he watching me like that? And why is he gonna keep checking in on me? It's not like there's any other way out of a Frisch's big boy bathroom stall. If you didn't see me leave through that door, I'm probably still in here!
Luckily enough, the Dark Moon fragments fit together again rather nicely when you find them, considering how low poly they are. Unluckily, each one is conveniently held by some sort of ghost that possesses something for you to fight, be it a giant spider, suits of armor, or the freaking background.
So I duck in the stall to try and get some privacy and relieve myself in peace. The door opens once again and shuts, so I poke my nose over the door, but I am still alone in the room. This guy wants something! So I start checking the stall for anything I might have missed. Is there a message written here somewhere for some secret gay meetup? Is there a glory hole in the walls? I have had enough penis thoughts for one day! Have mercy!
After collecting all the pointy rocks and battling ghosts in and out of our dimension, Luigi defeats King Boo and restores the Dark Moon and rescues Mario, because apparently he got captured again. I'm not joking, you find this out at the end of the game.
Trust me, stranger, you do not want my leaky goods right now, so go back to your crushed ice and onion rings before I run into this room with my pants down yelling, RAPIST!
Some of it's alright, but not a single track stuck with me, and no matter how long I played it, I couldn't hum along to it like the little green plumber wished I could.
Existence becomes ephemeral. The pain and paranoia drive me to nauseously transcend reality. There's a hobo creeping in on my only escape route, and I still can't pee!
You're listening to me, right?
So I give up on peeing and try to wash my hands. Who cares if I'm drugged up and in unimaginable penis pain? I'm not gonna let some child molester try to intimidate me. But then I feel something land on my shoes. With hands still soaked in the sink, I peer down between my legs and realized what just fell down was my underwear.
My favorite part of Luigi's Mansion was the interconnected Metroid Madhouse, and though this destroys that aspect of the game, the creative puzzle solving to get around this Resident Evil mansion is still very much a mainstay of the series.
I look back up at myself in the mirror, realizing that when I rushed to get dressed at the hospital, I must have somehow missed both pant legs of my underwear and didn't notice through the anesthesia overdose until it was too late and they fell right through my pants. And it was at this very moment that I stared myself in the mirror dumbfounded, and the door behind me opened once again.
If you just played Luigi's Mansion 3 and wanted to know where Polterpup comes from, I guess you could play this, but honestly he just kind of shows up, and he's more of a nuisance than anything.
We lock lock eyes, both stunned. He looks at me, then down at my underwear and my feet, and then back up at me, and slowly closes the door. I jump back to the stall, frantically trying to dress myself when the door busts open again. Tangled in my own pants now, I'm naked from the waist down, and prepare my anus for the most uncomfortable interaction of my life. There's a bang on the stall door, and I flinch out of fear before hearing my dad call out, wondering how I'm doing, considering I'd apparently been in the bathroom for half an hour.
Is this what you expected for a Luigi's Mansion sequel?
And it turns out once we finally got home, we saw the bill that the lousy hospital had the audacity to charge us for 2 anesthesiologists, counting the prehistoric bag of bones, and the dude who literally signed the attendance sheet and went home.
Me either.
Aside, what are we talking about?
Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon.
Oh, right, yeah, that game kind of sucked. The positive gamer in me, I guess, gives Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon a spooky 4 out of 10. It wasn't bad, it was just disappointing in every regard, which sure sounds like it was bad, but it wasn't. Sort of.
The critical gamer in me understands the decisions behind designing Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon enough to give it a 6 out of 10. Though I disagree with most of them. It's passable, and much more palatable if played with others in its multiplayer scare scraper mode. I'd have talked about it more if someone else had been willing to play it with me.
Nah, my story was definitely more interesting. And in the end, I was left with thousands of dollars of hospital fees, and the doctors claimed they found absolutely nothing wrong, and quote, I guess some people just pee a lot. But enough about my dysfunctional wiener. What do you think? Let us know how your positive and critical sides rate Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, whatever it's actually called, in the comments below.
I hope you appreciated dealing with a constantly disjointed story interjecting what you came here for. But if you got this far and still don't realize that was the entire point of the video, then you're just playing with yourself.
Where's that supply drop chopper?
Leon, you just asked a minute ago, and it's still on its way.
Please hurry, I don't know how much more of this I can take.
What's wrong?
Code Brown? Ashley won't stop complaining about the smell, even though she's the one always hiding out in the dumpsters that nobody's emptied in decades.
What smell, Leon?
Well, so there was the shotgun just laying there and all, but the second I touched it, this burlap sack-wearing dude with a chainsaw comes running at me.
What smell, Leon?
I crapped my pants, okay? Oh god, what now?
Chopper just got shot down.
Leon! No!
Oh boy, it's spooky time! May all your wieners be hollow.
What?
Like Halloween! Happy Halloweener!
We're talking about Resident Evil 4.
And I'm trying to come up with a festive greeting, Mr. Oogie Boogie.
Whatever. Today we're talking about a 2005 GameCube game that genuinely scared the crap out of little 13-year-old me.
Oh boy, my wiener was definitely hollow.
What does that even mean?
I don't know, I just wanted to catch on.
So what's the big deal about Resident Evil 4? Well, a lot, honestly.
Resident Evil is a campy horror game where you shoot zombies and eat plants.
You're not wrong.
But the big thing that set apart 4 from the first 3 was abandoning the horrendous fixed cameras and tank controls in favor of an over-the-shoulder third-person perspective. This lets us have a better control and understanding of where we are in space, preventing many unfair deaths, aside from putting us right in the face of all the spooky haunted house scares.
Immersion.
Yeah, that's what I said. Anyway, there's also a traveling merchant allowing you to somewhat customize Leon's loadout by selling trinkets and items you don't need in favor of upgrading and stocking up on what you do.
Now, if you're playing the 2005 original like we did, you'll also get the occasional QuickTime events where you'll have to press or mash the on-screen buttons whenever the cutscenes demand it, which is all the freaking time. I was unfamiliar with the button arrangement of the PS2 port at the time, so fighting Krauser in particular was indescribably unfun.
Yeah, it felt better on the GameCube and Wii, but those QTEs still suck. Luckily, the 2023 remake completely flushed those down the crapper and instead added a dynamic parry system, which adds far more what's the word?
Immersion!
Right, so RE4 also ousted the old increment saving thing, so you can now save as often as you want, and added a new inventory management minigame allowing you to obsessively organize all your crap. This oddly becomes one of the most satisfying parts of the entire game.
The game's still filled with absurd escape room puzzles and monstrous abominations, but this time we've also got a companion character to babysit. Ashley. So you'll have to protect Ashley occasionally along the journey, commanding her to hide or follow you to survive. In the original, Ashley was basically a liability health bar, but in the remake, she's got better AI, and if she ever gets caught, she's only incapacitated instead of handing out game overs. Now she feels like an actual person, which makes the game much more... it just feels more realistic, you know? For a GameCube game, this title looks phenomenal, and honestly still holds up. Fortunately, the remake is just as goofy. Prepare for Leon to backflip out of the way of chainsaws coming through the walls, instead of simply stepping backwards, because that's how you Resident your evil. Personally, I don't really see the need for a remake at all, but hey, now we can watch each individual hair on Leon's head flow in the breeze and get soaked in the rain. Wait, it doesn't do that? Looks like we need another remake. So the president's daughter, Ashley, has gone missing, and Leon Kennedy from RE2 is sent to Spain to investigate her last known whereabouts. Yeah, the Prez chose to send the one razzled cop of camp to make it out of Raccoon City alive, instead of a battalion of Secret Service members. Some dad. So Ashley was kidnapped by a group of Illuminati cultists afflicted with parasites called Las Plagas. Yeah, this time it's not actually zombies, but instead mind-controlling tentacle blade monsters. Yes, it's a horror game with tons of creepy situations and set pieces, but it's also pretty hilarious. Leon is even more comically unfazed than his last outing, and I can happily report that the remake is just as humorously cheesy as the original. The original script has also been toned down to be a little less misogynistic in the remake, and though it cuts some of the silly lines, they were definitely in poor taste. Oddly enough though, the original Japanese script wasn't as silly. Instead of saying boss, in English they say big cheese. And instead of did you forget something, it's did you forget your makeup or something? It ain't all great though. For one, this game adds a character it assumes you know already, even though he's new. I hate that kind of stuff. Yeah, and I guess the remake isn't perfect either. There's an important character named Luis who dies in the game, and the remake plays this out like a tragic death. But in the original, Leon dramatically yells out, Louis! Louis! Louise then dies of embarrassment. The remake also tones down some of the over-the-top hilarity, like the giant Mecha Salazar scene, and that makes me the big sad. It's also knockoff Metal Gear Solid. Excuse me? Let me put it like this. The government's top soldier is sent on a solo extraction mission where he procures his weapons on site and received updates over codec by a secret government agency that's not being completely honest with him. I'm not done. You get infected with a mysterious virus, you face an adversary from your past, the superhuman bad guys taunt you over your comm systems, you rescue a woman who eventually proves herself capable after plenty of on-rail shooting and grenade-flipping boss fights. You two escape together on a romantic jet ski into the credits at sunrise. Now that you mention it. Oh, and the game's loaded with totally unique lines like this.
If one's Lewis, who's the other? They're an intruder besides me?
Say he's using stealth, too.
Stealth? There's an intruder besides me?
And then there's this one where the pompous villain coyly references destroying your helicopter backup.
Don't tell me you've never swatted a bothersome fly.
I'm going to swat down a couple of bothersome flies.
Now that's just borderline plagiarism.
I don't ever remember being a part of your crappy script.
Well then, why don't you show me what a first-class script is like?
So yeah, the game's good because it's basically Metal Gear Solid. But it's campy knockoff Metal Gear Solid, where the characters are not nearly as interesting. This soundtrack's nothing to write home about, assuming you even still talk to your family in the first place, and I just got tangled up in my own analogy. There's no memorable melodies, but it's a horror game, and that's not the point. Instead, it's got great heart-pounding tracks for combat, intense atmospheric tracks for basically everything else. Even the stupid parts. Yes, no matter how campy it gets, Resident Evil takes itself more seriously than a nun in a bathing suit, or shoot, crap, now there we go again. Alright, so it may have copied Metal Gear's homework, but it's still a good game, especially if you giggle at mood-killing lines like this.
I've sent my right hand to dispose of you.
Your right hand comes off? Where's everyone going? Bingo?
If the scariest thing you can imagine being in a haunted house is a bunch of unruly Hispanics, do I have good news for you? And if you're not feeling the subtle racism against Spanish speakers, don't worry, the next game's about two whites who travel to Africa to gun down countless unarmed black people. Oh my god. Who thought this was okay? The positive gamer in me is a little afraid to admit I just give Resident Evil 4 a 6 out of 10. It's the good kind of bad, but in some ways it's just kind of bad. Honestly, it's not the kind of game I want to revisit more than once, but I definitely did enjoy this goofy, freaky game. The critical gamer in me appraises Resident Evil 4 with a 9 out of 10. It still is the definitive Resident Evil and one of the best in its genre. Sure, it's a campy mess of borderline plagiarism, but it's a fun ride nonetheless. But what do you think? Let us know how your positive and critical sides rate Resident Evil 4 in the comments below. Now, if you don't go play something scary and have yourself a happy Halloweener, then you're just playing with yourself.
What is that? What's in there?
Poopies.
That's poop!
Yummy.
Oh, you're right.
Even though I had my serious misgivings with Monster Hunter Generations, when the same inept team returned to make Rise, I still gave it a fair shot and played the demo. And, well, it sucked. Yeah, but to make matters even worse, the toxic community of immature crybabies that recently formed around this series threw an absolute hissy fit that I had the audacity to share my opinion on a video game. Because attacking somebody is the best way to change their mind. So I did what any other sane human being would do and just ignored it, instead playing other games that actually interested me and had a great time doing so. Monster Hunter World was incredible, and I'll gladly wait for the inevitable sequel to release. But since its community of insatiable acne-ridden glue eaters hounded me continuously to play the full game anyway, promising me that it wasn't what I thought it was, I caved to shut them all up. Then all those same lonely, drooling fart suckers went into ballistic temper tantrums when it still inevitably sucked. I swear, trolls just crave a negative feedback loop to latch onto and are allergic to holding an opinion of their own that wasn't unabashedly inherited by their paid influencer charlatans like the freaking 10 Commandments. Yes, I played and completed Monster Hunter Rise, including its DLC expansion Sunbreak, for no other purpose other than this review. And my experience with this already lackluster installment was marred by the very piss-gargling baboons who make up this parochial fanbase of stubborn imbeciles. I wanted to surreptitiously ignore this game, but here we are. So with all of that out of the way, I normally like Monster Hunter games. So how was Monster Hunter Rise? I admit, you were all right. I didn't have a fair view of the game just by playing the demo. The full experience was so much worse than I could have possibly imagined! Turn around and drop your pants, we're gonna be here a while. Let's start with the good stuff. You can now have a dog companion on top of a worthless cat accompanying you on your quests. Your Palamute is also large enough to carry you across the map. You can even sharpen on their backs as they scamper up walls and through all-terrain full sprint. Alright, with the good out of the way, onto literally everything else. Even though Rise shares a similar gameplay loop with the rest of the franchise, this game takes the anime over-the-top intensity of Generations and pushes it even further, as opposed to designing around a traditional grounded hunting experience like in World. Rise was developed by the same team who defecated out Generations, the questionably avant-garde folks behind the eye-rollingly anime Frontier spin-off series, where each new monster and mechanic was designed to be even more outrageous than the last. This is a constant separation of aesthetics, clashing with the established series that I grew to love, and it's an unavoidable trait of this entire game's design philosophy that I personally can't get behind. This first new mechanic slingshotting us into complete nonsense is the wire bug. The wire bug is an attempt to make Iceborne's clutch claw gimmick make more sense in universe, which I do greatly appreciate. It's a flying insect companion that will allow you to basically grapple around with silk threads, as well as activate the game's plethora of silly anime attacks taking the place of Generations arts. You're telling me a teleporting bug with video gamey cooldown meters is supposed to be believable when you slingshot around with its magical spider silk as it somehow locks in place mid-air? Not even top-of-the-line police drones could withstand that kind of force. And you're telling me this fairy foo-foo magic bug is supposed to help with immersion? The insect glaive is a wonderful example of how the symbiotic relationship of hunter and wildlife can be designed well in form and function. The wire bug, however, is a ridiculous excuse to let any hunter class double jump, instantly recover and attack mid-air, and allow all sorts of impossible physics-defying stunts for the sake of cartoonishly flashy action. But since we live in make-believe fantasy land, we can also also now run full sprint up any wall or obstacle and can even perform sliding attacks on seemingly flat surfaces, sometimes even sliding uphill. Base Rise has a ninja aesthetic, and they wanted an excuse to have the hunters Prince of Persia-ing their way around the world to fit narratively. Unfortunately, not only does this accidentally get in the way all the time during hunts, it's primarily used to simply get from one part of the egregiously designed maps to another. So even though some classic areas return, every single map in this game has a ton of insanely high cliff faces you need to run up and over in order to get around. All over the place, you'll be falling or getting knocked into deep ravines where the only way back up is an arduous trek around the spaghetti underground tunnels, or to scamper straight up the lowest ledge, utilizing both wire bug jumps in hopes of making it back. This forced verticality does nothing but complicate otherwise straightforward traversal, and you'll find yourself willingly leaping into some of these ravine traps due to the game teasing you along with a trail of the next huge gimmick, stat buffing endemic life.
This infuriates me! So you remember how World introduced a fully living, breathing ecology with small, believable creatures naturally roaming the environments? Well, now, not only are the new endemic creatures impossible to capture and collect as pets like before, every single one only exists to provide some sort of buff or ability to hunters as you pass or interact with them.
Just because you ate a meal to fill your HP and stamina or drank a demon drug to buff your attack, you didn't actually max anything. Instead, there's arbitrary hard caps for everything in order to make sure you spank enough birds and butterflies on every single quest to actually raise those stats completely.
This is so heinously counter to the very idea of endemic life that it irrationally makes my blood boil. These creatures that were created to bring realism to the world are now being used exclusively to suck every last drop of immersion right out of the game in favor of transforming their sole purpose into unexplainable video gamey buffs?
They don't even make any sense. Spearbirds just fart colored gas on you when you pass them, increasing something based on that color. Even the butterflies are color coded to let you know what skill they'll enhance when you interact with them.
I wish so badly you could just ignore this aspect of the game, but you have no choice. It's mechanically integral to the entire game's design. The arena and Elder Dragon fights just drop a multicolored bird in the camp so you can sniff its rainbow farts and instantly max yourself, implying that they honestly intended for hunters to run around the entire goddamn map for every other freaking quest on a pointless, fruity scavenger hunt for bugs and birds when you bought this game to hunt monsters!
So instead of adding to the game's ecology, the endemic life actively takes away any semblance of believability to the natural world that this held. There are so many horrible ones with outrageous effects and incredibly corny pun names akin to Pokemon, but I don't have the time nor the mental fortitude to dredge through them all for you.
So, World added a brilliant take on the old paintball system by allowing us to follow monster trails with footprints, debris, and remains. It added a whole new engaging take on hunting that gets completely removed in Rise in favor of absolutely nothing.
Each monster is automatically marked on your map at all times, whether or not you've even seen them.
What on earth are these Nimrods at Capcom thinking? It's like if Zelda completely removed the overworld, leaving a list of shrines and dungeons for you to jump between on a menu. That's half the freaking game you just axed, you fumbling dipwads!
Another huge aspect of the game's prior was in making the hunters feel small and struggling for survival against colossal monsters they had no hope in felling. Rise continues Generations' monster disrespect by overly buffing hunters on top of introducing its new take on wyvern riding.
Oh lord, so before when another monster invaded your hunt, everything turned frantic. You had to somehow dodge both of the beasts while also keeping an eye on your target. Now you can just use your silly wire bug to mount a monster and literally control them with silk puppet strings to attack the other one.
Instead of invading monsters being a threat, they've now become your most powerful weapons.
Hunters are encouraged to intentionally lead non-target monsters to the fight just so that they can ride them like a show pony and beat the crap out of the target one. Then after smashing enough faces into Campbell's soup, the non-target monster will always retreat. So there's absolutely no downside to continuously exploiting the other monsters as weapons.
I don't understand who this game is for. If the average gamer buys a Monster Hunter game hoping to ride monsters like Yoshi's and force them to fight each other, I wholeheartedly admit I have nothing in common with them, and can't see myself playing another game after this.
It actually gets worse. So if that wasn't enough of a tiny dick power trip, the needlessly complicated switch skill system is the icing on the cake. It is so obtuse and unnecessary, let's just say it's even more menu flipping button combo memorization nonsense than Generations
Generations arts. These add further customization to each weapon, but in the end will likely only be used by the hyper fans who refuse to try out the game's other 13 weapons. Now, if we didn't bring up Generations enough, the next few quirks of the game will all sound familiar to you. Once again, you have functionally unlimited cat minions to farm, hunt, train, and all sorts of other mindless crap. And every single time you accomplish the tiniest thing in the game's campaign, you gotta run around the entire map and listen to everyone's seemingly unedited monologuing text barf. My concern is more in the sloppy user interface. Veterans of the series will find themselves stumbling over newly phrased everythings for absolutely no reason. Even something as simple as going to the farm and trying to pick up your crops is a hassle in unorganized, sloppy wordplay. Now, if you thought the disastrously implemented endemic life was too video gamey, wait till I introduce you to the pinnacle of crimes against immersion, rampages. Ugh. So occasionally you have to basically play tower defense against the running of the bulls, and I know that sounds stupid, but I promise you that it's actually much worse than I'm making it sound. So get this, you run around and place things like ballistas and cannons with points. Yes, freaking points, and fight off announced waves of monsters. As you fend off these monsters, who all go down in seconds each, you level up your defenses, giving you access to plant better stuff. The goal is to prevent the apex leader of the pack from destroying your last wall of defense. Supposedly you're doing this to protect the town, but you have to level up and spend points just to get the townsfolk to man ballista and help out? Even the chief sits idly by until you unlock his help? Are your homes and lives in danger or not? It's also terribly convenient the monsters always choose to rampage directly through this one fortified trench and not from absolutely any other direction. And how there's only a few on screen at once, and when you defeat one it just dissolves slowly as your attacks miss and leaves you nothing to carve. And how a silly hunter gong suddenly quadruples your weapon power for no discernible reason. This whole event is the most asinine video gaming nonsense I've ever seen. Oh, and when he says they're led by apexes, don't get excited like they're bringing back that idea from 4. No, this is an inexcusable translation error where now there is apexes, the new watered-down deviant monsters from Generations, and apexes, the terrifying indestructible death machines from 4. How does something like this happen? Do I have to mail these goofballs a thesaurus? Well, Sunbreak didn't think that was enough and decided to add its own take on the old lazy hyper-tempered gimmick system called Risen Monsters. It's thematically exactly what apexes used to be, but functionally what arc-tempered elder dragons were from Iceborne. TLDR, it's nothing new. It also sorta kinda added its own frenzy virus thing for monsters afflicted by the new parasitic curio, but it's mostly for lore and only has negligible changes in gameplay, unlike the frenzy virus. Now, with all that crap out of the way, assuming you can suck it up and just have some fun and hunt some monsters, I've got some bad news for you. Though there's plenty of new and returning monsters, the game's single-player village campaign is shockingly short. There isn't even a high rank, and the whole ordeal is over before it even has the time to properly begin. Rise redefines the minimum amount of village quests, leaving everything else to the hub, both of which can now be played in multiplayer, nullifying the entire point of their separation. This entire gameplay experience feels like a meticulously researched self-sabotage of everything that made Monster Hunter so much fun to begin with. It was even released in an unfinished state where the main story didn't even have a conclusion. They had to patch that in post-launch, meaning that once the servers go down, this physical game will be forever unfinished and incompletable. The greedy bastards ruining one of my favorite franchises can't even help themselves from releasing unfinished cash grabs, knowing they'll be double charging the poor saps who paid full price for the rest of the game when they do get around to finishing it. Well, it's a good thing they added those dogs. We almost didn't have anything nice to say. At least it's not another 3DS port, even though honestly now that I say that, a port of 3 or 4U would have been infinitely better than what we got. The game looks comparable to World and runs well on the Switch, which is good to see. The water effect on fur and scales is also quite nice. We rarely see texture changes when things get wet in games. Is it obvious that I'm reaching here? Yes, now let's just get to the real meat of it. Water looks nice, but the elemental blights have never looked so hideous. Monsters will glow with a bright colored cloak that honestly looks like a debug mode filter or something. It's awful. So Rise is themed off ninjas and Sunbreak is themed off knights. Well, supposedly. It's actually Japan's loosely researched interpretation of the theme. I love medieval stuff and dressed the part in fully layered armor only to feel like the only clown in a half-baked circus. It's anime nights at best, and it comes off more like a costume party where nobody wanted to commit to their outfits. And it doesn't matter if you're in Naruto Land or King Arthur's underwhelming outhouse, the canteen will only serve you cake pops. Hope you didn't miss Monster Hunter's deliciously rendered mouth-watering dishes from before, cause it's a whole lot easier to model colored balls. Every day we're serving hemorrhoids and diabetes. Oh, and remember the hokey cutscenes the monsters got when you first saw them in Generations? Those are back, and now with amateur Mad Libs poetry and thick film grain filters. The best part is they forgot to switch the Japanese theme to a European one for Sunbreak, so it's not even trying to be consistent.
Those were just so extra, I just tuned those out. It was the ink-brushed monster icons that threw me off. You go from Rise to Sunbreak, and they didn't even think to update the icons accordingly, once again throwing aesthetics to the wind. The icons also have like zero personality this time, and some I can't even identify what I'm looking at. At least the loading screen scrolling banner art changes aesthetics, making the others that didn't more jarring. But that stupid loading screen ended up spoiling like half the returning monsters for me. And the new monsters are supremely goofy or otherwise over the top, like everybody's trying too hard. But at least there's more new ones than Generations.
Speaking of which, here's how I feel about all of them. Small monsters. Cross a raccoon with a hippo and you'll get this deformed, unlovable, obese, explosive fart badger. This is a Boggy. No, not Boggy from 3, Boggy from Sunbreak. I guess we forgot that we already named a small raptor monster of similar size and persuasion the same name. And it doesn't have a great form, by the way. It's just Boggy. This is a skunk goat, and I love it. I'm so glad I played through this entire game so I could meet the skunk goat. It's just another Velociprey, jockey, Macau, etc. Is Monster Hunter becoming Pokemon and we need a new 3-stage bird and butterfly every game? Flaming spider ticks who accidentally wore a winter coat to an active volcano. And here's his orange cousin called a Pyrantula. If you told me this was a new Pokemon, I'd believe you. Large monsters. Flame-barfing peacock flamingo. Salamander dog with endless streams of molten diarrhea. Supposedly this one's different because it's pretending to replace Agnactor in the volcano, and I assure you this annoying flaming silly putty flinger is no glorious Gariel. Rafiki the circus acrobat spawning infinite persimmons from under its fuzzy monkey boob fat. And here he is when he inputs a cheat code for infinite mini fridge size exploding pine codes from his fuzzy monkey boob fat. This spiky spawn of Frontier is the wyvern accumulative of a 2-timing Hummer-driving white trash redneck who beats both his wives. Because spewing fire, poison, and paralysis wasn't enough, now Maverick McDouche Nuggets threw defense down into the mix and 2 full-size American flags to the back of his pickup truck. An underwhelming Gogmazios wannabe you unironically face in the yawning abyss, with magically respawning Gatling guns in between back-and-forth slapping contests. Football gorilla who dug up the TMs for Fire Punch, Ice Punch, Water Punch, Blast Punch, Hawaiian Punch, and still fights by slamming his hollow skull in the dirt. Haven't I ever told you about Bumbles? Bumbles spit on their hands to freeze their arms into ice swords. Man, if you didn't do that, I'd have loved this big stupid Yeti. Great Macau with a classy haircut for his new driver's license photo. Werewolf cosplaying as Blue Eyes White Dragon. Antlered crusty magma marshmallow packs a unique ailment gimmick, all but forcing players to exploit the wire bug to remove it. Ugly, gimmicky, and unfun. Where power creep is a constant problem for trading card games, insanity creep plagues these new monsters, resulting in ludicrously fantastical silliness like this magical blade doofus. Count Dracula covered in butterfly leeches. Yet another Elder Dragon there's supposedly only one of that you defeat in the story, but somehow hunt a dozen more to make your armor and weapons. And yes, he has an extremely anime second phase as well. The considerably stronger form of Malzeno before it's afflicted with the Sucky Suckies. Even though that's completely backwards with the logic of how the other afflicted monsters we face work, but who's honestly still keeping track? Nothing screams magical make-believe like a fox that spits fire bubbles. Nursilla on fire that throws its babies like grenades. And Nursilla isn't even in this game. So this one explodes a little more, I think. I fought each of these, and I swear, I can barely discern half of the differences. 30-foot Mur-Otter unnaturally swimming in ankle-deep water. And here's another one to help pad out the monster list. Silly Kappa Platypus Frog Muffin. Floating egg sac hoarding double jaw dragon that fights you with big yellow circles. I'm not joking, it's going after your fear of geometry, which you also have to dodge with wire bugs while you shoot magically floating rocks with conveniently mounted ballista. The fact that this thing's ultimate form, much less second phase, didn't involve it dying before the egg sac bursts open with loads of tiny floating thunder dragon babies in a true final fight is an oversight I will never understand. Imagine you're a massive floating dragon, but you decide to hover a couple feet off the ground with your head generously presented on a silver platter for hunters to smack. If you can't tell the difference between these three things, that's because they decided to name the males and females differently again, and the third is unabashedly a name for one's enraged state to help pad out the lineup. No, the Gen U flagship is not in this game. This is actually a Crimson Glow Valstrax, noob. See, the name is totally different.
The more
I look at these, the more I think the Frontier aesthetic is the inevitable future of Monster Hunter, whether I like it or not. It's like we saw the malignant cancer growing in a prostate exam years ago, but now we can't treat it without removing 2 feet of our colon. Did you get that, Rise and Sunbreak defenders? He made an analogy about butts, just to make sure you understood. More like windbreak. That one was a fart joke, and butts make farts. I'm sorry we didn't establish that sooner. Alright. Monster Hunter stories always suck, so I never had my hopes up for this to begin with. A talented writer can tell a good story with any setting and characters. Monster Hunter having traditionally bland stories isn't due to it being impossible to tell a compelling one, it's due to developer indifference and/or lack of talent. It doesn't really help when they launch a game in an unfinished state and the main story doesn't even freaking conclude. Can it get any more obvious that this was a shameless cash grab? So in Rise, you help out a village of cosplaying teenagers who watched too much Naruto from a series of incoming monster rampages, which once again happen only in the heavily fortified trench fully armed with ballistas and cannons. These people certainly did not need you. And once again, you crawl through this bare-bones plot by chipping away at key quests one at a time. You take down the cover monster along the way and the game unceremoniously gives you end credits without building up any sort of climax whatsoever. Most people stop playing and move on to the next game when they reach end credits. That's what credits are. They go at the end. But you'll easily reach this point in a few short hours. At least it's an indicator for you to just stop now. You've seen enough. It might as well be over. So of course it's not, and next up, a big floaty snake possesses some twins and they go into a glowy trance, warning you that there's a big floaty snake that you gotta kill. So you kill the big floaty snake, or rather defeat it, but you don't see a body and you know it's still alive. And that's how the base game ends. So after some post-launch patches, you eventually kill the big floaty snake and its mate, even though they were just trying to get it on, you insensitive cock blocker. Cloaca blocker? So after whatever that was, you head off to the DLC where you're recruited to hunt 3 lords, as they call them, which all end up being fantasy interpretations of universal horror monsters, because that's the first thing I think of when I think of medieval beasts. Frankenstein, Wolfman, and Dracula. Do they not have a research team? Do they not have libraries in Japan? Is Capcom not aware of Google? They unironically decided to make the flagship monsters of their medieval nightly expansion American film adaptations from the 1930s? So eventually you find a flock of butterfly leeches is causing the real pandemonium, so you hunt down the source of their parasitic infestation and call it a day. Half of the story was hunting down a doctor and getting medicine for one hunter who got infected by these things from one hit. But of course Capcom's too chicken to actually kill anyone, and this threat never happens again, even when you fight the same monster and take dozens of hits. Are we just gonna forget this entire plot thread we spent half of the game establishing? I was pretty upset that they just keep telling and not showing for the whole story. Supposedly the entire ecosystem was dying to these things, but whenever you went on a hunt, you never actually saw it. That's infuriating storytelling, but eventually there was a quest where you saw some bodies on the floor, but not nearly to the extent that we were told. Besides, if you were a clan of humans fighting off giant monsters and they all started dying from a parasite that isn't attacking you, that's a dream come true scenario! Sure, it's blatant amateur storytelling that's incapable of the show don't tell philosophy. Sure, every character is as dry and lifeless as a loaf of bread, but it's the sheer deluge of rambling dialogue that pushes me over the edge. It's like they had an AI generate the dialogue after feeding it hundreds of hours of Dragon Ball and One Piece as reference, but asked it to write in the style of a straight-faced WWE match. You know, Monster Hunter could learn a lot from God Eater, which ironically is the over-the-top anime hunter-looter series that Monster Hunter wants to be anymore. But of all things to imitate, why was it the cringy one-liners in combat? I'm the best! Nothing can stop me! You won't know what hit you! Bring it on! I'm ready for anything! I rock! Triumph is ours! What's this?
Oh, well, you can turn it off. It's not a real issue.
Then why is it on by default and the mute option is buried in menus?
This one's gonna hit hard!
Oh, now I'm mad!
I'm the hunting boy! I'm the one who wins! Daddy needs a new pair of boots!
Nobody likes this! At least you can change it to Japanese or Monster Hunter grunts and set the frequency to 0. But even that doesn't stop the annoying chatter you get from characters while in menus like at the quest board in Smithy. Can you please maybe open that dresser drawer over there and stick a sock in it? And speaking of voices, for some reason most of the music this time has either nasally egregious singing or monotonous choral chanting in the background for absolutely no reason. It's not like the music benefited by having some lady play her nostrils like a clarinet. clarinet. I'm mostly bothered when intense character-themed tracks for returning unique monsters get needlessly generalized into the same old droning chant. Music is usually one of the best aspects of this series, but these remixes all suck. How do you screw up Zenogre or Chameleos' themes this badly? And for the love of God, why is Yoko Ono freestyle yodeling in the sandy plains? My favorite track plays whenever you clear an urgent quest. Ah, yeah, you can't forget this one. Good stuff. If you see a game called Monster Hunter and expect Naruto killing Circus Rija kaijus while nonstop dropping cringy Spider-Man quips, then this is the perfect game for you. I have 100%ed all English Monster Hunter games, including Gen U up to this point, but this is the first one I simply refuse. Not even my obsessive autism can carry me through this dumpster fire. This is Monster Hunter committing to go in a direction I disagree with on a fundamental level. It doesn't matter how many nostalgic returning monsters they add to the game when the foundation itself is beyond repair. Take it from someone who loves Monster Hunter. If this team continues churning out this laughable garbage, then I can't see myself continuing to waste my time with them when there's so many other great games I could be playing instead. So by sell it, we mean go get your money back and play something good. The positive gamer in me at least had enough fun laughing through this travesty to give Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak a 2 out of 10. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it for the clowns defending this goofy disgrace to the series. This game sucks, and I'm thrilled to never have to play it, much less talk about it ever again. The critical gamer in me struggles to justify the undercooked disappointment that is Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, settling on a 3 out of 10. At its core, it's still the winning Monster Hunter formula, but at seemingly every turn, it never ceases to undermine and tarnish its own legacy. To those of you who are capable of forming your own opinion and not being offended that another person's exists, what did you think? Let us know how your positive and critical sides rate Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak in the comments below. Unless you're one of those intolerant incel posers pissing yourself in fury that somebody on the internet didn't like your counterfeit hyper anime sham. 'Cause you're just playing with yourself. And your waifu is trash.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy is my favorite kind of franchise, where instead of committing to familiar settings and characters, it instead establishes its own style of window dressing that could be used to decorate any crazy ideas for a new RPG and make it still feel authentic. Yeah, there's always the same magic, a ragtag group of misfits, recurring enemies, and attack vernacular. Nothing else matters. Yeah, it's like you can make anything a Final Fantasy just by giving it the series staples established by the first 6, and it'll still make sense. Just like how you can string lights on a palm tree and still call it a Christmas tree. Though some of the modern ones come off like Christmas lights on a refrigerator. It's still festive Final Fantasy! So let's dive into the last of the mainline sprite-based titles that set these standards for defining the series, Final Fantasy VI. Also known in the West as the Super Nintendo's Final Fantasy III, or by Nimrods who can't read Roman numerals as Final Fantasy VI. I think I started this game over at least 5 times just trying to decide on which version to fully commit to. There was seemingly something disappointingly lacking in every version of the game. The Super Nintendo original had a botched English translation which screws up major story and gameplay elements alongside some silly censorship. Though the PS1 port fixed a good amount of that alongside adding a couple cool pre-rendered CG cutscenes, it also suffered from new slowdown from excessive loading due to the disc-based system. Whereas the Game Boy Advance port adds a ton of extra bonus content to the game, but it also excessively brightens everything, expecting it to be played on a tiny backlit screen, and it also re-censored some elements as well as garbled the entire soundtrack for those awful GBA speakers. Then there's the Wii Virtual Console version, which obviously doesn't exist anymore. And let's not forget about the hideously remastered iOS and Android mobile port with grossly smooth new sprites. This version brings back a ton of the GBA bonus content, but even if you can get over for the art style, it also unfortunately doesn't exist anymore. Not even the Steam port of the mobile port. Then there's the Super Nintendo Classic version that's got the new save state and rewind functionality, but also goes right back to all the problems with the original in a direct port. And finally, we come to the recently released Pixel Remaster Edition, which came with wonderful new sprites, remastered music by Nobuo Uematsu, EXP boosting options, alongside loads of little quality of life features. But it has new tiny UI for widescreen TVs and a hideous font completely disjointed for the game's entire aesthetic. Eventually, due to fan outcry, Square ported the game to modern consoles and added an option to replace the font with a less ugly one. And this was the version I finally settled on to complete. Sheesh! If only it were priced better so more people would be willing to try their legacy content. Oh, and it removed all the GBA bonus content, by the way. Come on! Just like that Christmas palm tree, Final Fantasy VI builds upon the foundation of its predecessors with 4's active time battle, 5's job system reworked into Magicite, where powerful entities called Espers can be equipped like charms, granting the wearer bonus level up attacks and stat increases. The Magicite system is incredibly engaging. You'll always be trading Magicite around so your whole party can eventually master all of the attacks they can. You prioritize who gets what strategically, as they will permanently learn these moves whether or not the Magicite is still equipped to them. You really do build your characters from the ground up. You can also summon the Espers for powerful effects in combat, but this is only something that the one holding the corresponding Magicite can do. This game has a whopping 14 party members you accrue over the course of the adventure, and each one has unique mechanics individualizing them in combat, so they're all worth your attention, especially when the story requires you to split the party, sometimes into 3 groups. Boy, did I get screwed over when my underleveled C team was forced to fight an unexpected boss and the first 2 didn't. But the best part was I didn't win by over-leveling. Instead, I experimented with and better utilized each character's unique abilities in order to play smarter with my limited teams, and that's what FF6 is all about. Well, and exploring a huge continent and neurotically hunting down party members and Magicite to obsessively teach everybody everything. Oh, and that goes without saying. This installment's aesthetics deviate from the established medieval themes and instead take us to a fantasy world millennia after the advent and downfall of magic, where steampunk industrialization is the new norm and magic is a long-lost art. As long as you're not playing that chibi mobile port, these sprites are all great. All characters even emote in charming little ways like gasping in shock or wagging their finger, and the remaster especially adds some spruced up animation effects that the Super Nintendo could only dream of. The sprites themselves got a nice colorful overhaul, keeping the original illustration style, but also adding wider ranges of hues and shades that weren't possible before. Oh, and most importantly, before you start the Pixel Remaster, go to Options, Configuration, and Font Style to make sure everything is a heck of a lot more legible. And that also goes without saying. In the midst of a technological revolution, the power-hungry Gestalian Empire discovers the long-forgotten powerful Espers and drains each one's magical powers from them, disposing of their bodies like refuse, and utilizing their magic to fuel their new militarized war machines called Magitech. And this is where the story begins, with Terra, a brainwashed hostage of the Empire, forced to pilot a Magitech unit, destructively overpower the small mountain village of Narsh, and attempt to recover the town's recently discovered Esper encased in ice. Even though Terra strangely has her own innate magic, the Esper overtakes her and the Gestalian forces accompanying her. She's rescued by Locke, a treasure-hunting thief working for peace through a group called the Returners, who help Terra escape and set her off on her quest to bring this war to an end. There's this great moment in gameplay whenever you have Terra use magic for the first time. The other party members just stop combat immediately and freak out. Even the monsters stop and stare in confusion. So you join up with Edgar, the machinist king with a mobile sand-swimming castle, and his monk powerhouse brother Sabin, after fleeing the flaming castle of Figaro set ablaze by the crazed Gestalian mage experiment gone wrong, Kefka. This crazy clown is a byproduct of power-hungry monsters attempting to create Captain America super soldiers with newly discovered magic. It technically worked, but the resulting man became a psychotic, bloodthirsty monster. The group then mates up with Cyan, an Arthurian knight who lost his family and entire kingdom to Kefka's dirty tricks, poisoning the country's water supply, and Celis, a former general of the Empire, being a Magitech-injected soldier herself, turned rebel after simply questioning Kefka's decisions. Yeah, that's about it for the expected characters, as everyone else is totally weird. As if a king, monk, thief, knight, and a pair of magical girls is considered normal. You stumble across and basically adopt Gao, a wild kid abandoned at birth and raised by monsters. He's basically Tarzan who grew up in the Forgotten Realms. You enlist the help of Setzer, a wealthy gambler piloting a massive airship allowing you to fly around the world, and Shadow, a quiet ninja, and his dog Interceptor. Shadow joins you occasionally for his personal means, but Setzer is just straight up bored and thinks that it'll be fun to bring down an empire. Eventually you find a distant town secretly using magic where the elderly mage Strago and his artistic granddaughter Realm join the party. An elderly geezer magician and a little girl who fights monsters by painting them? Still too normal. And lastly, the missable characters, Mog, a talking Moogle, Umaru, his Yeti friend, and Gogo, a mime you meet in the belly of a massive sandworm. And this group of weirdos are fighting a clown taking over the world. That's about as normal as blood in my urine. I gotta stop pulling all-nighters. And that's about all we're gonna say before digging into some spoiler territory, so skip ahead if you're still hoping to go into this one blind. Eventually, you discover that Terra is a crossbreed between a human and an Esper, explaining her magical ability, and she has to come to terms with her violent Esper half taking over and learn to control her powers. You stage a trap for Setzer to enlist his help in crossing the ocean by performing in an opera anticipating Setzer to crash the party and abduct the lead character. Yeah, this is a normal guy. So normal. But this opera scene is no joke. You've got to memorize and recite all of your lines, which get beautifully remastered with vocals in 7 different languages in the Pixel remasters. This scene is like video games Romeo and Juliet. It's breathtaking. But anyway, back to the normal. To put a long story short, eventually you clash with the Castalian Emperor after they inadvertently unleash hell upon the world, accidentally releasing the long sealed away Espers from their dimension. You fight through all forms of monsters and Magitech gear before the final confrontation on a floating continent standing before the Warring Triad. The Warring Triad are 3 gods who fought for power over a millennia ago, and realizing the disaster that their fights caused upon the world, unleashing magic and creating the Espers, they turn themselves into stone, sealing away their power, holding everything in balance. But Kefka suddenly backstabs his emperor and shoves the Warring Triad out of alignment to assume ultimate power himself, even knowing that it would obliterate the entire world. You fought hard and made it this far, but suddenly the Mad Jester just usurped the Emperor and set the entire planet on a crash course of destruction for no other reason than he just wants to watch the world suffer. You lose. No matter how hard you try, the bad guy destroys the world and you lose. This may be one of the most unbelievable plot twists in gaming history. Years later, where the very continents are rearranged after the violent earthquakes and uprising of Kefka, Celis awakens from a coma on an island with no other land in sight, where her only companion, Sid, soon falls ill and dies, taking away her last hope in life. Celis, disheartened from indescribable loss, journeys to the northern cliffs to cast herself into the sea to commit suicide. Oh my god, that's so sad! Now, it's possible for Sid to survive, but it's unlikely, and honestly, for Celis' story, this moment is made even more painfully gut-wrenching if he dies. Celis thought she was the last human left alive in the world, and had her every last hope shattered, leading her up this cliff to end her life. But the poor woman survives her fall, waking up on the beach, where a seagull flies off holding Locke's headband. Celis realizes there's a chance that the others have survived, so she sets sail on a makeshift raft and embarks on a quest of her own, locating her lost compatriots in the world of ruin. From here on, you'll be exploring what's left of the decimated world and reassembling your party scattered after the years of hopeless misery caused by Kefka's reign of terror. But they all need their hope to be reinstilled that Kefka could possibly be beaten. Even Terra refuses to help you for a long while until she's hardly given a choice. You also get much more depth into the characters in beautiful little ways we can't elaborate on for the sake of time, but eventually you decide that life in this ruined world isn't worth living for the remaining surviving human race unless Kefka is eliminated. So you gather your strength and throw yourselves at a literal god. Clown god, still a god. And though he mocks you for your fruitless second attempt to stop him, you manage to weaken his resolve, showing him the strength of humanity's hope in you to create a better world. Shoved into a corner, you all manage to finally smite Kefka. Celis basically soloed him for me with half MP dual casting Ultima, Go-Go miming her attacks, and the other members just casting heals and buffs. So it really came down to a magical girl and a mime killing Clown God. Even though there's little world left to return to, humanity is given a new fate with the complete elimination of magic as it fades away from existence alongside the Espers and power of the Warring Triad. I don't even know if that's a win. You lost so hard, the entire world was destroyed. The final stretch through the world of ruin is such an emotional punch in the gut that it turns what would have been an interesting RPG into an unforgettable one. Exactly, with a mime killing a clown god. Normal. Honestly, it's the music that made me unsure of which version to play the most. The SNES original is amazing, but the GBA kinda ruins it. I even tried modding the SNES soundtrack into the GBA version. And then the Pixel Remaster came out and it's magnificent. Oh, no doubt, this is some of Nobuo Uematsu's best work. And the remaster even allows you to switch between the original and his newly orchestrated versions. Normally I'm one for the retro sounds, but the newly orchestrated renditions are all so well done, keeping the melodies and flow of the Super Nintendo, but making it sound as grand as you originally imagined. I never switched it back. And we mentioned it before, but moments like the opera scene, the opening road to Narsh, and the ending flight on the Blackjack are all so well done they bring a tear to the eye. If that doesn't do it, the price of the Pixel Remaster bundle certainly will. If you're turned off from old Final Fantasy thinking you'll have to grind for dozens of hours, then flush your worries down the crapper, because the remasters added an incredible adjustable XP, Gil, and AP gaining option, allowing you to choose how much or how little you'll have to grind to beat the game. There's even an auto battle feature allowing you to breeze through random encounters, letting you cut the game's playtime down to as little as you want. I also had the huge relief of being automatically checkpointed back to before I died, when before I'd be sent all the way back to my previous save. You can still manually save like before, but now there's an extra quick save and autosave feature. How cool is that? Most importantly, I suplexed a ghost train. What have you done with your life? If the answer isn't suplexed a ghost train, you're missing out. The positive gamer in me enjoyed the heck out of Final Fantasy VI with a charged 8 out of 10. It's such an amazing world to explore, with all of its funny, sad, and emotional moments from the beginning run to Narsh to the bitter world of ruin. The critical gamer in me is delighted to see such a well-preserved icon of gaming history in the remastered Final Fantasy VI, awarding it with a 9 out of 10. It's one of the best RPGs I've ever played, and still holds up nearly 30 years later. But what do you think? Let us know how your positive and critical sides rate Final Fantasy VI in the comments below. But if you're just one of those goofballs thinking retro games are only good for nostalgia, not only are you missing out on some of the best games ever, you're just playing with yourself. Seriously, I beat this game in 2023. How can I possibly be nostalgic of that?
Ocarina of Time sold an unprecedented 7.6 million N64 cartridges.
Yeah, that's nice.
Ocarina of Time was the very first game Famitsu ever awarded a perfect score.
They did the same for Skyward Sword, so it doesn't exactly amount to much.
Guinness World Records and Metacritic agree that Ocarina of Time is the most critically acclaimed video game of all time.
And both sources are notoriously biased.
Dozens of publications and reviewers agree that Ocarina of Time deserves to be ranked as the greatest video game of all time.
You know, the heat death of the universe hasn't happened yet, so it's a tad soon to be spouting an of all time of anything.
In 1998, the late Pope John Paul II proudly proclaimed from the Vatican that Ocarina of Time was the greatest gift to humanity since the Ten Commandments.
Other games are cool too.
November 21st has been internationally recognized by 98 countries as New Christmas, the day memorializing when our true savior was born.
How did we get here?
All 32 megabytes of Ocarina of Time have been distributed throughout the cosmos via intergalactic space probes, spreading the seeds of humanity's greatest gift to an untold number of entire galaxies, solidifying Ocarina of Time as the greatest video game in the universe.
Yeah, I guess it's alright. I vividly recall the media spectacle of this game coming out, since games never got that level of attention before, and this was on top of the advent of the Pokemon tidal wave that swept the nation. Willst thou soar, or willst thou suck? Nintendo actually aired this on TV. I was 6 and this was embarrassing. Not only was a video game being shown on television, it was 3D. It had action, it had drama, it had weird title cuts and Shakespearean prose with questionable delivery. Willst thou get the girl, or play like one? But the game itself was incredible for the time. It leapt to 3D graphically and mechanically leaps and bounds more gracefully than almost any other series had, achieving overwhelming praise for decades. Metal Gear Solid came out this same year. Why do you have such a problem with this game? I don't! It's everybody else who seems to have this unholy obsession with what's effectively just Link to the Past in 3D. You take that back. You're right, Link to the Past is a lot better than that. 3D was a huge deal at the time. And it's fine! Just don't soak your tampon screaming about it. Just imagine early 3D game development where nobody understood how to build around, much less design a comfortable way to play their games. For the Zelda team, the question immediately became, how do you make Link to the Past work in 3D? Just imagine what almost was. You're running through a tunnel and your camera misbehaves, clipping through the walls. You get ambushed by bats and slowly get smacked around to death because you couldn't aim with your slingshot. Little things that we take for granted are instantly alleviated by the brilliant solution to simplifying this 3D transition, Z-targeting. Do I get to play this time? Knock yourself out. Nice! Though I'm missing the rumble pack, so I guess the Stone of Agony is not gonna work. With Z-targeting, you don't have to try and free-aim those slingshot pellets or aimlessly run around enemies and try to attack and dodge them. The camera, as well as Link's aim, will lock on to whatever target you're facing upon pressing Z. This idea was so revolutionary, nearly all 3D action games would replicate it even to this day. Play Ocarina of Time without Z-targeting and you will instantly appreciate how much of a difference this makes. This game would probably be ridiculed as unplayable jank were it not for this one feature. We were also first introduced to the new context-sensitive A button, reacting differently based on where you are and what you're doing, allowing you to do things like pull and push a block, then climb on top of it, all with the same button. Sure, that's loads better than a Dragon Quest submenu popping up for everything, but boy does this game twist my Deku nuts when the stupid A button doesn't change fast enough, and I find myself impatiently doing all the wrong stuff on accident, forced now to undo the mistake and wait even longer for the dumb button to realize what I wanted it to do the first time! Anyway, mechanically, the game is virtually identical to the Link to the Past formula. Collect a green, red, and blue thing before gaining access to the alternate version of the world map and collecting the other half-dozen things to beat the big bad, all the while fighting and puzzle-solving your way through elaborate dungeons. Most of the cool gear you find in dungeons originates directly from Link to the Past as well, like the hammer, hookshot, and yes, even the ocarina itself. This is done to ensure that the 3D transition can be as seamless as possible, while also ironing out how everything is going to function from here on. Also, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Link to the Past is a masterpiece. No shame in copying the formula verbatim while experimenting with 3D. They also added a couple stealth segments for some reason, but for the most part, it's mechanically really solid. There's just a few minor complaints I have with the gameplay. Here we go. So jumping out of the Dark World in Link to the Past was easy peasy, right? There were portals all over the place, and once you were in, the magic mirror could instantly spit you right back. not in Ocarina of Time. We'll get more into it in the story segment, but instead you'll be traveling through time 7 years. It's another creative way to use the same map and assets to increase the game's length, just like in the Dark World. However, the only way to go to and from time periods is by running all the way back to the Temple of Time and interacting with the Master Sword. From about halfway and on, you will get the ability to fast travel for some locations, but it never stops feeling arduous, especially when some dungeons and side quests require both young and adult Link to contribute. You fast travel and interact with the world in new ways by playing music with your ocarina, which is a really cool implementation over the simple flute that just summoned a fast traveling duck from Link to the Past, as hilarious as that was. I actually really love this too. You'll pull out the ocarina and can freestyle play music where A and the C buttons become different notes, and by playing one of your learned songs correctly, you can do all sorts of neat stuff like prove your connection to the royal family, change day into night, or even stun those freaking nightmare fuel redeads. The day-night cycle is kind of important as well, as it'll affect whether townsfolk are awake and going about their business, or asleep or closing up shop. Unfortunately, in these smaller zones with people, time doesn't pass like it does out in Hyrule Field. Yeah, Majora's Mask is gonna go hog wild implementing that feature, but instead we gotta accept that the sun's gonna fly across the sky in Hyrule Field and suddenly freeze in Castle Town. And it certainly will get your attention, as you will have to make your first long run across the field to the castle, likely just missing the drawbridge as night falls. I understand why they did it this way and appreciate the immersion it adds to the world, as the NPCs feel more like real people and less like Walmart greeters, who aren't real, and you can't convince me otherwise. Instead, most players mash A to constantly roll, as it's a little faster than running. I found that Z targeting 90 degrees from where you want to go and strafe jumping, you'll reach your destination even faster. Unless, of course, you found the horse Epona. After learning Epona's song in the past and winning a particularly rigged couple of horse races in the future, you'll rescue Epona, the ornery mare that allows you to ride clear across Hyrule Field in no time. Which is finally when Hyrule Field stops feeling so barren. It is so big and so empty, it's mind-numbing in places. You can even pull out your bow and fire arrows while galloping full sprint. However, it's locked to first person. Good luck hitting 1,500 points worth of targets in Gerudo Valley for the biggest quiver, and all 10 big Poes twice before they flee so you can earn your final bottle with jerky N64 controls on horseback. I'm not miffed this took me several hours to accomplish. What are you implying? Riding horseback is cool and a huge bonus addition to the series. The game can't get everything right on its first try, but for a first attempt, Ocarina of Time does a fabulous job at overcoming this most challenging hurdle in gaming history, the leap to 3D. Did it though? You know how long it takes to open a chest in Link to the Past? Boom! It's open! You immediately see what you got and you move on. In Ocarina, Link has to slowly crack it open, obstruct the camera view as he climbs in, conceal it in his arms, and slowly turn around and finally raise it into the air. What's your point? You'll be 7 years older for real when you're done waiting for every Skulltula to turn around and waiting for the sun to go down and waiting for the Master Sword animation to finish so you can just move on with your game. Okay, to be fair, almost every single enemy in the game is beaten by targeting them, holding up your shield, waiting for them to put down their guard, and striking. Rinse and repeat until dead. Everything. It's fun, but repetitive. Ocarina of Time, ironically, does not respect yours. It's still aged considerably better than the vast majority of its competition. But that doesn't even fix how frustrating some parts are. The 10-item-long Big Oron Sword trading sequence is obscure and challenging. The Ice Cave is a living demonstration of how Z-targeting can't save you from unfair and unfun cheap shots. And the Water Temple is famously confusing because of the three-dimensionality of the dungeon. For the full experience, I also completed the 3DS version, and it fixed the Water Temple in a big way by color-coding the doorways leading to where you can change the water level. For every great inclusion I love, there's another I loathe. There's Volvagia, but there's also Bongo Bongo. And you've got to slog through Jabu Jabu's belly to enjoy the Forest Temple. And if you're not immediately on top of your next task, you will be hounded by Navi the Fairy, even if you're at the location already doing exactly what she is nagging you to do! You know, it's weird, they fleshed out the world so much that you'd want to spend time relaxing in it, fishing, or playing some mini-games like Bomb Chew Bowling. However, Navi incessantly demands you get a move on. Look, I've played this game since I was 6. I know it inside and out. Even when I make a beeline straight for my objective, Navi still isn't satisfied enough For crying out loud, you didn't even let me finish my sentence!
Listen!
That's it! You listen!
Watch out!
Anyway, the game is really well designed and I love it.
Me too! You know what's cooler than numbered generic dungeons? Going inside a massive sentient tree, an active volcano, the bottom of a haunted well, inside the belly of a fish god. The world design is equally ambitious as it is insane.
Link's redesign is also probably my favorite in the series. They even designed unique tools and weapons for both young and adult Link to help individualize both.
To visualize the complicated targeting system, Navi will fly around your target and change colors based on the situation. It's so clever, you probably didn't even notice it was happening.
Then there's the 3DS remake, which is almost entirely a graphical enhancement.
But whose idea was it to make the cover diarrhea brown with nothing but the logo slapped in the middle?
These N64 graphics are so nice, Game Freak is only just now catching up to it.
We'll only stop making fun of them when it stops being correct. In the peaceful kingdom of Hyrule, a little elf boy from a fairy village is sent off on a quest to deliver a shiny green rock to Princess Zelda by the Great Deku Tree, an enormous mustachioed talking tree who's apparently hollow and has a giant eyeball spider abomination inside of him.
Link discovers he's unlike the other Kokiri children living in the forest, who are all accompanied by fairies and stay as children forever. The Great Deku Tree reveals that Link is actually a Hylian, whose mother fled an attack on her village and eventually died in the forest, leaving Link under the talking tree's care.
So Deku Dude finally ends Link's ridicule by giving him a fairy to accompany him on this journey leaving the forest, anticipating some sort of foreboding evil, though that may have just been indigestion from the truck-sized arachnoid in his gut, but whatever.
So Link sneaks into Hyrule Castle to meet Princess Zelda, who warns him an evil Gerudo man from the desert troop of thieves, Ganondorf, is schmoozing up her father, who must be too smitten with his handsome demeanor to realize that this is an obvious trap.
So she sends Link to gather the other two spiritual stones and return them to the Temple of Time. After blowing up a frog dinosaur and performing an endoscopy on a whale, Link returns to the castle where Ganondorf chases the fleeing Zelda on horseback. She tosses Link the Ocarina of Time and hopes that there still might be a chance that he could stop the uprising.
But things don't go exactly as planned. Once placing the spiritual stones and entering the hidden chamber in the Temple of Time, Link discovers and draws the Master Sword, where he is suddenly flung 7 years in the future.
So apparently the sword decided Link wasn't ready to be the hero of time yet, so it transported him into a void realm and knocked him into a coma until it thought he was ready. And in all that time, Ganondorf absolutely destroyed the castle and its surrounding town, rebuilding it all his own. Now it's all black and pointy, so you know he's serious.
Link then has to travel across the future oppressed land of Hyrule, searching for 6 sages to aid him in his battle with Ganondorf.
But weirdly enough, even though we're told that Ganon's smothering evil force corrupted the land, Hyrule Field is ironically safer in the future. There used to be skeletal wolves and helicopter pineapple things made of knives. Now there's just some ghosts that flee from you only on horseback. Sometimes. Nothing else.
But Castletown is abandoned, instead overrun with re-deads, strongly implied to be the zombified remains of the innocent townsfolk.
So Link gathers the troops from the Forest, Fire, Water, Shadow, and Spirit Temple, who each give him a shiny pachinko token thing that does absolutely nothing other than give Link an excuse to hold something over his head, because holding the actual sages up like items would have been a little too on the nose.
So you storm Ganon's castle with the help of the sages, making a rainbow bridge because Mario Kart is cool, and deactivating the weird ghosty lock things restricting each of the sages' abilities, or something like that, in order to open the way to the long, winding staircase up to Ganondorf.
He was just chillin', playing on his organ, hoping you'd enter at that very moment for dramatic effect. So Navi, of all times, gets too spooked out of the guy and won't help you, as you have to dead man's volley magical balls back and forth to render the flying sorcerer vulnerable.
She does that because the developers knew targeting would make this fight as easy as playing ping pong against a wall.
Anyway, you defeat the Dark Magic Man and rescue Zelda, who got captured, by the way. Probably should have mentioned that sooner. Zelda actually survived these 7 years by cross-dressing as a Sheikah man, stupidly named Sheik, because she was probably put on the spot at one point for her name and had a brain fart.
Sheik had been helping you out all along the Sage Hunt, teaching Link new teleporting songs and offering advice. It wasn't until acquiring all of them that she, or rather he, felt safe enough to reveal his, or rather her, identity as the 7th Sage, Princess Zelda.
Suck it, transphobe. Zelda had a penis for 7 years.
Well, I mean, she technically did use magic to change her gender.
Magical penis. Even better. Now I've got that Freudian magical penis envy.
Maybe suck it was a poor choice of words. Maybe endure it. No, that's worse.
So the two of you barely escaped the collapsing tower Metroid style when out of the rubble, Ganondorf's corpse levitates in the air and swells with so much hatred-fueled power, he transforms before your eyes into a bipedal piggy man, dual-wielding swords each the size of a school bus. He immediately swats away the Master Sword and traps you in with him inside of a ring of fire. Deal with it. That's what I should have said. Too late. So Link clenches his heroic butt cheeks and takes on one of the hardest fights in the series to date. Unless he nabbed the Bigoron sword beforehand, then he just slaughters the big guy, Master Sword or no.
With censored green blood to secure that E rating, even though you brutally impale him through the forehead.
Yeah, the ESRB really saw a dead hand and thought what was tipping things over the edge was Ganon's inside juices being the wrong color.
Well, with Ganon defeated, Zelda sends Link back in time so he can relive his missing 7 years.
Where Navi immediately gives Link the deuces and pisses off. This clearly triggered the guy's Stockholm Syndrome, considering Majora's Mask only happens because he spends the rest of his life looking for her.
Anyway, the game concludes with an amazing cliffhanger, where Link returns to the young Princess Zelda in hopes of preemptively banishing Ganondorf in the past, creating 2 canonical split endings, one for the past and one for the future.
But Nintendo ruined that fan theory potential like a cringy 50-year-old chaperone jumping in for the electric slide at a high school prom by publishing their own nonsensical timeline, undermining and misunderstanding their own content.
But we already covered that abomination in an episode all of its own, shameless plug.
Yeah, I'm so cool, I'm just like you guys! Hey, look, I can do it too!
I really hope you get his analogy here because this is just embarrassing.
That's the point! Now watch me do some radical moves. I absolutely love the Link to the Past soundtrack, and it even sounds great on the N64.
There are a lot of new tracks, and they are all great as well. This is still the legendary Koji Kondo, after all.
Though she's annoying as a sea urchin in my anus, Navi actually speaks with English voices to get your attention, and that's pretty cool on a system this old.
The fully voiced Metal Gear Solid did come out this same year, though, so...
Oh, so now it's okay to admit that other games exist?
Okay, to be fair, the N64 is no PlayStation, and all characters still emote with audible grunts and sighs.
I guess you can't freestyle jam on a chunky flute in Metal Gear, so that's gotta count for something. Look, I really like this game. I do. All I'm trying to say is it's not perfect.
Ocarina even has some of that Link to the Past exploration, where bonus and even mandatory items are found in peculiar, seemingly optional ways, and that is how you make a real Zelda game. Tears.
I've lost count of how many times I've played this through the years, starting and stopping, even hacking and modding it for fun, but it wasn't until last month that I finally 100%ed the entire game from start to finish. However, I drew the line at hunting down more than the required 50 golden Skulltulas. That guy can rot for all eternity as a cursed spider hybrid for all I care.
My daughter begs for me to read her Link stories every night, so I eventually showed her there's actually a game about it. We slowly played the entirety of Ocarina of Time together, and she loved every minute of it, even getting adorably invested in Link's boss fights and horse races.
Malin's stupid race challenge only serves to spotlight how finicky Epona's fence jumping is.
Bomb.
I love this game. The positive gamer in me outweighs the fond memories of Ocarina of Time over the janky bits that aged like a decomposing buffalo, with a 7 out of 10. That's a good score. That means I liked it more than most and came out of it happy with the overall experience. That's how math works. This game is good, but it is far from perfect.
The critical gamer in me recognizes the incredible strides forward the entire medium made with the release of Ocarina of Time, awarding it with the sacred 10 out of 10. As an N64 reimagining of Link to the Past, this game is nothing short of phenomenal.
So what did you think? Let us know how your positive and critical sides rate Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Did we mention it's a Legend of Zelda game? In the comments below.
It's definitely an important landmark in gaming history, but so is Half-Life, Donkey Kong, heck, even Minecraft. But if you're fooling yourself into thinking that this is the greatest video game ever made, well, it's obvious you haven't played very much, 'cause you're just playing with yourself. present for you. Is it a bomb? Because that would be pretty fitting and admittedly well-deserved. Also, that says happy birthday.
You're a mean one.
Okay, just don't break into song. Oh, I really think you're gonna like it. Or at least I hope so. Alright, I'm a little nervous. I swear, if this last one's empty, I'm gonna leave this open just in case. I'm holding it? Yeah! That's my 3DS.
Merry Christmas!
Oh wait, the surprise is on the 3DS. Is it now? Open it up and check out the new game I installed. They made a port of Metal Gear Solid for the Game Boy Color? Not exactly. It's actually a completely original game produced by Hideo Kojima, originally called Metal Gear Ghost Babel, that got ported by imbeciles who thought that calling it the same name as the PlayStation game would actually help it sell. It obviously did the opposite, and everyone just assumed it was an inferior port. How'd you get it on my 3DS? Well, I found the game file floating around on the Internet Archive, converted it into a CIA file, and installed it with some custom firmware so you could actually play it as authentically as possible. Legally gray! Nice! But I have a Game Boy Color, you know. Cartridges are kind of scarce and pricey. It's a Game Boy game. It can't be the holy sh**. This is actually really cool. It plays miles better than the old MSX games. The graphics are unbelievable for the system, the soundtrack is great, and the story is just as compelling as any other Metal Gear. This game really is a forgotten classic. No kidding, this is one of the best Game Boy games ever made, and I love this system. I did a good. This conveyor belt stage kind of sucks. I'm just kidding. You gave me an excuse to review Metal Gear Solid again. Here, have a Scooby snack. For clarity, we're going to refer to this game as Ghost Babel, and not Metal Gear Solid, like the rest of the civilized world. Ghost Babel also shares initials with Game Boy, and it's too good of a title to just throw away. So in Ghost Babel, you'll play traditional top-down stealth gameplay in mission-based stages segmented for portable play in mind. Though it looks similar to the MSX games, it actually plays way more like the PlayStation, with fluid 8-directional movement, dynamic screen scrolling, creative boss fights, and nearly all gear from the PSX returning in some capacity. Though this is undeniably one of the most advanced Game Boy games ever made, it's also one of the toughest. Guards, cameras, and hazards are fair, albeit challenging. The real struggle is against the timer. Yeah, so you could just totally ignore the timer and enjoy a slow and steady infiltration, but when each mission ends, you'll be ranked based on your playtime and a few other factors. And it doesn't matter if you managed 0 alerts, killed 0 enemies, and used 0 rations, you will almost certainly get rank terrible on your first playthrough for nearly all missions. It's a Game Boy game and they're banking on replayability. Once you know where you're going and what you're doing, you can practice getting those excellent ratings. But even with that, I don't see how humans are supposed to clear the C4, Nikita missile, or cardboard box conveyor puzzles quickly, even with a battle plan. Mostly because there isn't a map, but you do have access to your codec, which you can utilize as often as you like as your timer pauses when you use it. Or just, you know, not care about the fact that the game's gonna call you terrible every 20 minutes. My self-esteem is already debilitated, Ghost Babel. You can't break what's already broken. I don't think I'm going out on much of a limb by saying Ghost Babel is the best looking Game Boy Color game. Nothing else even comes close to this level of artistic dedication to make everything feel as professional as the series demands. The texture and pixel artist for Solid, Ikuya Nakamura, returned to provide illustrations and fully designed the characters, and they're all incredibly fleshed out and expressive, even when shown on a tiny 4.5-inch screen. The way the game achieves its fluidity is by meticulously crafting extra frames of animation for everything Snake does. Most actions on the MSX use 2 to 3 sprites each, but on the Game Boy Color, those same actions now have 6 to 8, and that's on top of the higher quality and better colored artwork. I dabbled the cancelled Resident Evil Game Boy Color prototype, and it's an impressive, albeit incomplete pseudo 3D interpretation of the PlayStation game, but fell apart due to technical complications. Ghost Babel is pulling off the same system jump, and it looks even better. And that was just an attempted port. Ghost Babel is a whole new game! A forgotten Hideo Kojima Metal Gear in his prime. Are you ready for this? Merry Christmas! We're reviewing Metal Gear Solid again! Before we get into this, just know in advance, we're going to talk about some minor spoilers this time, considering, let's be honest, your likelihood of actually playing this game, no matter how highly we praise it, is slim to none. Come on, like you were about to hunt down an out-of-print $200 Game Boy cartridge. At best, we can convince you to emulate it, because even if that somehow did, in some universe, negatively impact Konami, that wouldn't exactly be a hard pill for anyone to swallow, considering, you know, they're Konami. Now let's clear up a common discrepancy with this game. Ghost Babel is technically non-canon in the traditional sense, existing as an alternative to the Shadow Moses Island incident. However, it absolutely does still fit into the Metal Gear canon in a very real way. If that doesn't make any sense, keep in mind this game was written by a madman. Solid Snake is coaxed out of retirement by Roy Campbell to infiltrate the South African country Gindra in order to locate and destroy Metal Gear Gander, hijacked by the local terrorists. Yeah, that doesn't sound familiar at all. Swap Gindra for Alaska, and you've got the opening to Solid, yes. But aside from this conflicting as Snake's first mission after retirement, both games are also the first time that Snake meets Mei Ling. And I present to you the only two reasons why this game isn't canon. Except it is. We'll get to that later. Anyway, it turns out the terrorist group leading the uprising is actually an ostracized replacement for the original Foxhound crew, known as Black Chamber. They're now aiding a local rebel separatist group known as the Gindran Liberation Front, or GLF, setting up headquarters at the Fortress Galuad, formerly known as Outer Heaven. This gear couldn't be any more metal. Aside from Campbell and Mei Ling supporting Snake, there's also Weasel and McBride, a pro-assassin and CIA agent respectively. Snake also meets up with Chris, a recon operative on the scene, gathering info for Snake and filling the Meryl role, even down to the masquerading as a guard shtick. Chris is actually set up to make you think that's all there is to her character, but some of the game's best twists involve her story arc. This is a unique Metal Gear, so expect plenty of deception and intrigue. The game knows what you're expecting, and it's ready to suddenly stick its tongue in your ear. You've also got your Otacon stand-in, Jimmy, except he's an uncooperative, pudgy brat, who ends up in his own redemption arc where you finally start to feel for the poor kid right before he explodes right before your very eyes. Say that again? This 16-year-old kid is blown into unidentifiable chunks of human meat. What was this game rated again? E. Excuse me? E for profanity, masochism, racism, murder, alcohol, blood, psychosis, and ethnic cleansings. And blowing up kids. Oh, Jimmy popped like a balloon. I'm convinced the ESRB didn't even make it past this game's attract mode. Anyway, Jimmy went kablooey because he was about to spill the weakness of Metal Gear Gander, and apparently his handcuffs had a hidden microphone and were completely formed out of C4. Holy crap! So Snake rushes to stop Metal Gear, but arrives too late and can only watch as Gander fires a real nuclear warhead at the United States. Luckily, it was just an enormous warning shot, considering they actually aimed at Nevada, and since nobody actually lives in Nevada, they just turned a desert into a desert with a big hole in it, just to make the US president drop some stinky beans in his britches. This is all happening while you're trying to weed out a traitor in your ranks, as you discover there were actually 5 surviving members of Black Chamber, and 1 is unaccounted for, acting as a mole. After defeating all but their leader, Blackheart's Viper, Snake confronts Viper in front of Metal Gear and learns about the group's history. Black Chamber was sent on their own mission 2 years ago to recover the hijacked Metal Gear, because apparently this keeps happening, and upon their successful return, were ambushed and nearly wiped out by Foxhound as ordered by the US government, fearing that the world might inadvertently learn of the secret group's existence. What's the one thing real life and anime have in common? The US government is always the bad guy! So retreating from the ambush, the few surviving members of Black Chamber plotted revenge against the government and ultimately the world for treating their lives like toilet paper. Viper even lost his left arm in the betrayal, resulting in him utilizing an advanced prosthetic. He then led his followers alongside an army of recruited military supporters in a crusade against the world. Blackheart's Viper is just a better executed Venom Snake. He's the hero of his own story and a tragic villain who we must ultimately take down, covering up the very crime that created him in the first place. After an incredibly tough fight against the general piloting Metal Gear Gander, he informed Snake about what was really going on here. The US had secretly been funding Outer Heaven since the beginning, and executed Big Boss through Operation Intrude via Solid Snake. Now their plan for the facility is to extend the US superpower to the entirety of Africa, codenamed Project Babel. So who you thought was this crazy war general and band of terrorists were actually the good guys trying to protect their homes from an oppressive outside nation. Who's actually the bad guy here, Snake? Snake then obtains the hard disk data on Project Babel, proving the General's claims, before fighting Viper to the death in order to prevent the downed Gander's secret ace in the hole, access to dropping live nuclear warheads from 7 orbiting satellites across the globe. This is like the craziest aspects of every Metal Gear game to come without all the extra chaff, and all happening at once. There's so much more, but I want to leave you some cool surprises for when they buy and play a 23-year-old Game Boy Color game for $200. Right, so Snake and Chris managed to escape alive with the global holocaust prevented and threats eliminated. Snake returns to the high-ranking US manipulators behind the scenes to make them pay for Project Babel, with the proof in hand that they wanted so badly to destroy, even knowing Foxhound is likely waiting for him there in ambush. Snake kinda becomes Big Boss in this one, huh? Man, this game is intense! So after beating the game and completing the extra VR training stages, you'll get a message from the anonymous number 4, congratulating you for your performance, even referring to you, the player, by the name Jack. What?! Yes, you've actually been playing as Raiden from Metal Gear Solid 2, playing as Snake in a training simulation prepping for what will become the Big Shell incident. Metal Gear Solid 2 didn't even come out for another year! All the later Metal Gear games' best reveals and plot twists were actually done way back in 2000 on the Game Boy Color. Ghost Babel is secretly one of the most impactful Metal Gear games, leaving nothing but greatness in its wake. Man, this Game Boy game stealing the PlayStation 1's title is actually cooler than some of the later mainline entries in the series. And that's saying something! Every time we talk about Game Boy music, I get uncontrollably giddy. This soundtrack somehow retains the tension and intrigue we expect, but translating it all in a new, uniquely sounding way. Not much more to say other than that, bibbity boop. One of the best aspects of Metal Gear is having constant access to multiple support characters via codec calls that change throughout the journey, and it's just as in-depth here. You'll be outside sneaking past guard dogs, and one character has to tell you about their breeds, and another warns you about startling away the local birds that are giving away your position, and another comments on your weapon choice. It is so cool! If you recall a certain rogue AI ranting about Fortress Galluad over codec in Metal Gear Solid 2, now you know it's because Ghost Babel was a training simulation stored in its databanks for a certain Jack to participate in. Show this game some love, cause Konami sure won't. They didn't even include Ghost Babel in their recently released Master Collection Volume 1, but instead, of all games, added Snake's Revenge, the non-canon joke from the NES? What? Black Chamber might just be the best Foxhound stand-in unit after the original cast of MGS1. And we didn't even talk about the other 4 members. You know, we gotta leave you something to discover after We're not very subtle around here. The positive gamer in me was shocked at how enjoyable the stealthily hidden Metal Gear Ghost Babel really was, with an 8 out of 10. It's a shame this forgotten installment is secretly one of the best in the entire series. The critical gamer in me is proud to expose Metal Gear Ghost Babel as proficient enough to steal an alarming 10 out of 10. Sure, it's got a couple head-scratching levels, but the overall package is surpassing even the very best of its already strong Game Boy competition. It makes me think of that other Game Boy Color stealth action game by Konami. Wait, what's that?
You're a mean one.
Oh, come on! Surprise, it's a special bonus Christmas special for the Grinch. What are you talking about? Look, I get it. Licensed games usually suck, especially old ones. But this game's surprisingly fun. If I don't play along, he's just gonna hit me with the obvious joke. You got it, Buster! Humbug. Similar to Ghost Babel, you'll play as the Grinch stealing presents from patrolling citizens of Whoville. You've got snowballs and bubbles for defensive distractions, and that's it. Outside of your buddy Max helping out in his own levels. It's mostly a battle against the clock, racing to steal away all the gifts in each level. The only way to fail is by letting time expire or by getting caught and hugged, causing your heart to grow 3 sizes and failing your mission. Yuck. Even when you lose, you win! Jokes aside, this actually looks really good for the Game Boy Color, with hilariously expressive portraits for cutscenes and in gameplay. Since it was releasing alongside the live-action Jim Carrey adaptation, it used it as a source of artistic inspiration while merging with the established Dr. Seuss. Nobody cares, why are we even doing this? Christmas! To steal away Christmas from Whoville, the Grinch gets an awful, terrible idea. He's gonna walk around in broad daylight and delete their gifts from existence by touching them. Hey, come on! Just read the book! This soundtrack's actually not too bad either, though some tracks are shameless knockoffs of familiar Christmas jingles. The Grinch's despicable laugh whenever he completes a level has irrationally stricken remorse into my cold black heart for what I just did to these people. That cackle's unsettling. Bet you didn't expect Konami to develop a Christmassy Metal Gear game for Game Boy, did ya? It's not even using the full title. The 3 words that best describe it are... alright, I guess?
Now don't be such a...
Don't make me whip out the 39.5-foot pole.
The Christmassy gamer in me gives the Grinch a holly jolly 6 out of 10. You'd be surprised to find some festive fun in this even more forgotten Konami stealth game.
The critical... it's like a 5. That's fine.
Your soul is an appalling dung heap, overflowing with the most disgraceful assortment of deplorable rubbish imaginable, mangled up.
I'm starting to think that you're the reason I hate Christmas.
But what did you think? Let us know how your positive and critical sides rate Metal Gear, Ghost Babel, and Grinch while you're at it in the comments below.
Well, if you thought Bomb was gonna let you off without sneaking in a stealthy Christmas surprise, and you're just playing with yourself. You know, there's only one episode we did that I still have regrets about.
What's that?
In the Metroid 1 episode, I mixed up our ideologies while writing the script, and I basically read what should have been your lines while you read mine.
Oh, no, you're talking about that one review where we sat in each other's chairs and pretended to beat each other the entire time.
Well, yes, that's exactly what happened.
So for clarity, it was me who said that Metroid 1 is just a 3 out of 10 since it's so rough around the edges and difficult to enjoy.
Of course, and it was me who said it was a 7 out of 10 for taking enormous strides forward in game design and establishing a brand new exciting genre. It's nice to finally retcon that mistake.
You mean properly explain it so that nothing went over the audience's head?
Obviously.
The only mistake made was viewers mistaking us for each other because we sat in different chairs.
I'm also prepared to gaslight my way out of this.
Do we have to explain everything to you?
I'm offended you can't tell us apart.
What are we to you? Oompa Loompas?
Now let's discuss the GBA remake, you oblivious wiener sponge.
What's a wiener sponge?
Metroid Zero Mission is a mess.
Whoa, what? I thought you loved Metroid.
Passionately. That's why I find the sloppy design of Zero Mission so egregious.
Zero Mission is loads more playable than the original.
Sure, but that comes at the cost of completely misunderstanding the original's design philosophy to a disturbing degree.
I'd say it's at least the best way for new players to experience the first game.
Hard no.
Come on then, what is it?
I'd first recommend Metroid Plus Saving, a mod of the original that adds in dozens of tweaks and quality of life features like stackable beams and a scrollable minimap, all while still running on the original hardware.
But the NES is still uncomfortably janky.
And for you, I would recommend a Super Metroid hack called Retroid that uses Super as a framework to completely rebuild the original game. It's not perfect, but if the control eats you up that much, then it's a definite improvement over the NES.
Where does Zero Mission fall in this?
Then I'd recommend the original.
Don't listen to him.
And finally, Zero Mission as a last resort.
I promise it's good.
Good for nothing.
Trust me.
Trust me.
Metroid Zero Mission is a full remake of the original NES game built for the Game Boy Advance, coming a couple years after Fusion. It uses Fusion as a framework to completely rebuild and recontextualize the first game.
So the problems of Fusion get exacerbated, all the while sucking away the game's non-linearity.
So you'll explore a reimagined planet Zebes complete with new bosses and incorporating new upgrades from the rest of the series.
With Fusion's intense gravity, forceful hand-holdy progression, and redundant text barf.
One thing at a time, Hamster.
Alright, so first of all, your control is extremely stiff. You jump and fall incredibly quickly, making combat in especially certain boss fights unnecessarily frustrating.
You'll get used to it, but the addition of Fusion's power grip will allow you to hang on ledges and climb up, so everything doesn't have to be so spastically fast.
Also, unlike the original, you will continually run into Chozo statues that serve no other purpose than opening the path forward and placing an obvious marker on your map, telling you precisely where to go next. And you can't skip it.
To be fair, it doesn't tell you exactly how to get there, and though the game is extremely linear, you can still escape and sequence break it quite a bit with some in-depth knowledge of some obtuse tactics.
It also sucks when you frequently get unknown items that do nothing but sit in your inventory for pretty much the entire game, and once you finally get them activated all at once, by the way, the payoff isn't even almost worth the disappointment in gathering them.
Yeah, lore-wise, it's because Samus's current suit wasn't equipped to utilize those upgrades, and it's not until the end game when she acquires a new legendary power suit that she can utilize them. Game-wise, I agree, that's just not fun.
And call me an idiot, but I get annoyingly stuck multiple times every time I play this game, and it's always passing one convoluted hurdle or another.
Like those stupid bugs you gotta roll around in so they can crawl all over your body and then run into a completely different location, jump in a vat of acid towards an impervious pulsing vine just so the apparently indestructible bugs can eat it, even though the game gave you no indication of that working whatsoever.
Yes! Who wants that? It's a Metroid game! Let me actually use my own found tools to overcome obstacles, for crying out loud. Did you even play the original?
At least the new boss fights are a welcome addition. I especially like the huge rumbling centipede thing that surprises you occasionally in Brinstar. If only his name wasn't literally Charge Beam Beast. Rolls right off the tongue.
But most of these boss fights kinda suck when compared to the rest of the series, especially the last two.
Oh, we should mention, after you defeat Mother Brain and escape, where the original game would have ended, this game continues with Samus's ship being shot down by space pirates. She loses access to her power suit for some unexplained reason, and has to infiltrate the nearby pirate mothership and Chozo ruins in hopes of commandeering a new power suit.
So now you're suddenly playing a stealth game as Zero Suit Samus, armed with nothing but a wimpy paralyzer pistol, forced to sneak past pirate forces unnoticed. Yeah, we're kind of reviewing two games in one here.
If you're caught, you'll be hounded by powerful space pirates firing flurries of their weaponry regardless of you wearing armor to withstand it or not. They want you dead anyway, and this part is actually really fun.
Yeah, it's easily the best part of the game.
Yeah, I know, right?
Makes me wish they instead opted to make it a full-blown game of its own rather than slap it on the end of an already half-baked Zero Mission.
Oh.
Zero Mission's map is way smaller than the NES's take on the same space. Had they just fleshed it out enough and then also released the Zero Suit stealth concept as its own full game, I'd probably have no complaints. Instead, we have two half-baked conflicting ideas fused together.
You know, the only thing I don't like about this is that it forces players to fight Mother Brain thinking they are finishing the game when they clearly know they didn't get all the missiles and energy tanks, not knowing that the rest are actually found after that point of no return.
So if they did happen to miss some stuff before beating Mother Brain, they just locked themselves out of a 100% game file without even knowing it. Man, this and the unknown items, Zero Mission just goes out of its way to disappoint you.
If you can make it to that point, you really don't need any more pickups to beat the game. It's not like Fusion where you can easily render your game unwinnable.
So the stealth parts are fun, but boy, howdy are those bosses in this part of the game trash.
Yeah, so eventually you'll fight this annoying mirror ball puzzle thing where you're the one actually damaging yourself until you figure out what's actually going on, but after getting the new power suit from it, you satisfyingly obliterate the space pirates that pursued you along the way, and that always feels great.
And then it all comes to a head with one of the worst final bosses I have ever experienced.
Yeah, so apparently Ridley was building a giant robot of himself for reasons, but he never finished the wings and legs. So this hulking unfinished Ridley mech claws its way over to you, and you've got to destroy it, I guess, because the door's locked or something.
This fight is so horrendous because Mecha Ridley is only vulnerable to missiles in a tiny red spot on his chest. Problem is his arms and jaw are almost constantly blocking this line of sight, so even figuring out that this is a vulnerability is another painful experience, but actually shooting it is another test of frustration where your fast fall speed will drive you crazy as you constantly jump and miss all your openings.
Even still, everything post Mother Brain was bonus content, and for the most part, it was all really cool! Minus the boss fights.
So cool, it's spat in the face of what makes Metroid Metroid.
Come on, it's got Samus fighting aliens on planet Zebes with all sorts of series staples added for even more authenticity.
Metroid 1 is a long, huge maze of a game where the goal is to constantly venture into unexplored territory in hopes of acquiring permanent upgrades for Samus. The planet itself is the unforgiving, treacherous labyrinth it is to reward players for engaging with its completely open design framework. Zero Mission isn't even almost that.
If you're turned off by the original game's jank, don't listen to him and just play it.
What kind of remake completely removes the entire point of the game?
Are you gonna be like this for all the other segments too?
Absolutely, now get off my lawn.
Zero Mission takes on a new colorful graphic novel aesthetic for the series we haven't really seen since.
If you wanted your Metroid to look like a goofy cartoon, then this one's for you.
I like it. Also, we got these cool animated cutscenes introducing bosses and connecting story segments for added suspense and context.
Those are really nice. Though I prefer the painterly realism style of Super, I can't disagree that the cutscenes add quite a lot to the experience.
Glad to hear you're coming around.
And maybe it's just me, but everything feels a little too zoomed in for comfortable gameplay.
Alright, Grandpa, now let's get you to bed.
Compared to the original, which we've already reviewed, Zero Mission adds to the original story with cinematic cutscenes for added suspense, and for the most part, it's all really effective. It also added large blocks of redundant text that achieved nothing other than wasting the player's time. Just because Fusion's monologue crimes got eclipsed by Other M, make no mistake, Zero Mission is written just as poorly. By this point, Super Metroid was a decade old. How do these people not understand how compelling their own storytelling became while devoid of any dialogue past the introduction? Good to hear you coming around. Truth is, I never sat well with the blabby text in the GBA games. Explain to me why we needed the entire cutscene we just watched explained to us in full written detail. Like, what does that actually add to the story? Might have been important to instead mention why or how Samus even lost her suit, considering it's the sole cause of the entire final quarter of the game. Or how this is her first mission when she's already known across the galaxy as the most experienced bounty hunter for this job. Of course we don't get that, we just get a screen full of redundancy and an awkward opportunity for Samus to call this her Zero Mission, cause verbalizing a title drop totally isn't seen as the most amateur writing cliche conceivable by man. The story is like watching a bad video game movie. The setting and characters are all there, but it's a colossal disconnect between out-of-touch directors visualizing fanfiction and understanding the nuance behind a video game's experience. Metroid on NES is a long, silent horror movie, and Zero Mission is an in-your-face 2000s action flick where it suddenly switches gears near the end to pad out the story since they realized it wasn't long enough. It's like if the rest of this video was suddenly a classic noir police interrogation for absolutely no reason.
Now listen here, you wisecracking numbskull. You're gonna tell me the truth, or so help me God, I'll have you locked up for the rest of your miserable life. You understand?
Yeah, boss.
Now can you, sir, tell me the difference between this here Nintendo Entertainment System and this Nintendo Game Boy Advance portable gaming system?
Well, the Game Boy's just all around more powerful. It's got better hardware inside, you see?
Wrong! The speakers on this Game Boy Advance are about as muffled as a Ford jalopy on a Sunday morning, whereas this Nintendo plays clear as a whistle.
What are you talking about? That's not fair. The Nintendo's using the speakers on the telly while the Game Boy's using its own speakers. Forget about it.
Hold it right there. Explain to me then how my boys were able to extract this tape from both sources. Take and listen to this. Confounded contraption.
It's a Nintendo, all right.
Now here's the same song, the very same song, mind you, played on the Game Boy Advance.
Well, it certainly sounds a hell of a lot better.
Better to an untrained ear, I say. This here noise is just about as lousy as a ball game in a downpour.
The melodies are all the same, man. It's the speakers. I tells ya, it's the speakers.
Kids these days, there's not an ounce of respect left in them. They're all the same.
Look, boss, ain't none of what you heard from the private dick matters, and I'll tell you why.
Nah, how about instead you actually explain what any of this fancy new stuff actually adds to the original Metroid for the Nintendo Entertainment System?
Just look at it! The Technicolor graphics are better, the control and features are objectively better if I do say so myself.
So let's say I ask, say, top-of-the-line New York chef to try and create a new, better American cheeseburger, and in full defiance of God, the man slaps whipped cream and colored jimmies on top of that there cheeseburger.
What are you talking about?
Sure, the kiddies will think that's better, but no culinary enthusiast with their salt would so much as honor that madman. It's a joke! A sham!
That actually sounded pretty good to me, boss.
Quiet, you bonehead! I asked you if it didn't outperform the original and render it obsolete, then what's the point of a remake in the first place?
Probably money, I suppose.
See, now you're talking some sense, Buster.
The positive gamer in me thinks Metroid Zero Mission is good enough fun for a mean 7 out of 10. It takes an otherwise rough experience and makes it a heck of a lot better, and adds loads of new stuff into the mix for better or worse.
Now listen here. The critical gamer in me isn't about to respect Metroid Zero Mission when it doesn't even respect its own origins with a dwindling 4 out of 10. In many ways, it's an undeniable improvement, but under closer inspection, it's a sloppy, amputated, misinformed sham of its former ambition.
Golly, boss, but what do you think? Let us know how your positive and critical sides rate Metroid Zero Mission in the comments below.
I tell ya, the original Metroid can be rough, but if you can see past that to appreciate everything that it gets right that Zero Mission doesn't even understand, then you're just playing with yourself.
hamster, check it out. I think I'm growing a third nipple. Oh, hey, pretty flower. Don't touch that!
Oh, Daddy. Oh, wow.
Oh, well, that was something.
I'm not sorry.
I'm gonna have to restrain myself from saying the word wonderful so hard you have no idea.
Super Mario Wonder is the best 2D Mario game since Super Mario World.
Everything in between felt like forced corporate mandated formulation.
Finally, the bland new series is no longer new, and Mario is allowed to be creative again.
This may or may not be related to a certain Shigeru Miyamoto being unexpectedly absent from the credits, believe it or not.
Actually, this might just be the new best 2D platformer ever made.
Wait, what's with this standee gotcha nonsense?
Might.
Bummer we didn't review Super Mario World yet, cause it's gonna come up a lot when talking about Wonder.
And that makes me so happy! World is my favorite Mario game, and finally seeing a true return to form after over 30 years is great.
In Super Mario Bros. Wonder, you'll play traditional 2D side-scrolling levels, but without the timer, where the goal is to reach the end flagpole while nabbing purple coins repurposed from Odyssey.
So just like in Odyssey, regular coins are just for getting 1-ups for every 100 you find. But purple coins, on the other hand, act as your currency where you can purchase all sorts of little bonuses at the various shops scattered across the 8 game worlds.
One of the best things you can buy are the new badges, which you can equip before any level and even change up if you fail. Badges add some sort of minor twist on the gameplay, like giving you a grappling hook, higher jumps, or even some joke hindrances like non-stop running, jumping, or invisibility.
I didn't think I'd like straying too far from the vanilla, as some badges looked like they'd break levels wide open. But to my surprise, every level is so well designed that every inch is meticulously crafted to maximize enjoyment no matter the playstyle. It's impressive how well this works.
But the real goal of the gameplay is in collecting Wonder Seeds, which you'll earn for finding each exit from a level, finally returning from World, and from completing crazy challenges initiated by touching the new Wonder Flowers.
When you grab a Wonder Flower, all sorts of bonkers stuff can happen. Absurd transformations, changing physics, or perspectives, anything. And the craziest of all, the game never recycles any of these ideas. Some appear referenced in late game Gauntlet callbacks, but that's it. And even then, it always feels original and fresh. The game is overflowing with creativity in every single level.
It also learns a lot from the past 30 years with new cooperative multiplayer, where players can save each other and even work together rather than against each other to complete levels.
It also kind of learned from Dark Souls of all games that allowing the passing ghosts of live players around the world to encourage and occasionally lend a helping hand to one another is wonderfully good.
I just wish the grind for completing your standee collection wasn't determined by gacha, but at least there's a Poplin and Special World who can at least guarantee you new ones, but for a higher price, of course.
Gotta keep you grinding those purple coins somehow. And also, isn't this the first time every character plays with the same jump height, run speed, and all that?
Yes, we're finally purging Mario of Doki Doki Panic character stats. Next, can we please get an easy mode toggle that's not based on whether you choose Yoshi or Nabbit?
Don't shame people for liking cute, colorful dinosaurs, Nintendo. I'm sure there's a reclusive deviant crowd out there ecstatic that there's new official elephant forms of the entire Mario cast.
Why is that your first thought?
Well, when you make a power-up that literally names your characters Drill Peach and Drill Daisy, I start to get a little concerned.
I actually found the new bubble power-up to be the most interesting and versatile, allowing all sorts of mid-air jumping and enemy trapping shenanigans. And don't even get me started on how artfully done each of the wonders are.
Yeah, except for that one that unfairly insta-killed me, thinking I was clipping between two moving pipes when I was just standing on top of it. This game ain't bug-free.
There's still a tremendous amount of polish, and thankfully Wonder shakes up the generic world theme stereotypes enough to stay colorful and interesting. The backgrounds especially are some of the best in the entire series.
Yes, they look great, but keep in mind we're comparing this to a literal rendition of The Hills Have Eyes, so you be the judge. Par for the course in Mario, this story sounds like the mad ravings of a street-peddling crack addict, you know, passionately proclaiming his love of Taylor Swift and the Little Debbie oatmeal cream pies while playing imaginary fruit ninja with a hockey stick in a Wendy's parking lot.
Bowser touched a magical flower and turned into a giant flying fortress shaped like his face, so Mario and company join up with a caterpillar prince to swap their seasonal flagpole designs and accrue 6 truck-sized seeds to pop off the munchy cloud plants that were protecting Bowser so he can host a killer bass-dropping rave party.
lunatic. It breaks my heart to get such a wonderful, outstanding Mario game and not have Charles Martinet reprising his roles in it. Nothing against the new actors, they're all great, but it's just kind of sad to see him go at such a critical moment for the series.
Luckily, who is still around is the legend himself, Koji Kondo, absolutely killing it.
And you know what? I thought for sure the talking flowers were gonna get on my nerves, but they're actually really funny and charming. If it weren't for the amusing writing and delivery, they could have easily detracted from the game, but instead they help bring it all to life.
But yeah, it's a real shame about losing Charles Martinet as Mario.
He's been my Wahoo Man for as long as I can remember. We can't just replace the Wahoo Man. I don't need imitation Wahoos, I need my one true Wahoo Man. This is the creative resurgence 2D Mario has needed for nearly 30 years. If you are at all interested in 2D platformers, then missing Wonder is unacceptable.
There's also countless callbacks to past games in the series, and so many new ideas crammed in here, it's a wonder it all works so well. A surprise, rather.
Wonderful is just one of my go-to words to describe something that's this good. So, it'll have you grinning from ear to ear from beginning to end. Yeah.
But they should have just cut bros from the title. I mean, come on, they knew everybody was just gonna call this Super Mario Wonder anyway.
Shut up, the game's wonderful, amazing. The positive gamer in me gives Super Mario Wonder... Oh, well, I guess you're right.
See?
A wondertastic 9 out of 10. Though it's an undeniable spectacle thrill ride, once it does its thing, there's not much really left there in terms of replay value. What is there, though, is a non-stop fireworks show that never lets up until credits.
The critical gamer in me is relieved to finally recognize Super Mario Wonder as the true successor to Super Mario World with a tremendous 10 out of 10. This evolution in form and function is a welcome breath of fresh air for both Mario and the medium in general.
What do you think? Let us know how your positive and critical sides rate Super Mario Wonder in the comments below. Oh, hey, look, another flower! Bomb!
You're just funny yourself. Huh? I'm just funny myself.
Oh, Elden Ring.
Oh! Jeez, Elden Ring. Oh! Elden Ring. Elden Ring! Alright, this isn't funny anymore. Come on! Elden Ring! Did you just ambush Bomb again? You do realize the only reason you're living rent-free here at all is because Bomb likes your older brother Dark Souls, right? Don't pretend like you don't have to earn people's respect just because you've got the same genes as Dark Souls. He's smarter than you, he's got more charisma and personality than you. Heck, honestly, he's a heck of a lot less bloated than you are too. Where'd he go? For the love of... Why do you brag about how big your map is when all you offer in terms of level design is the same old ambushes around every single corner? Elden Ring looks like straight-up open-world Dark Souls. This might actually work, unlike all the other franchises attempting open world for no reason.
But Dark Souls is open world.
But no, that's not the same.
Oh, so you're saying it's the same non-linear world design, but now with huge open fields between all the levels.
Right.
With occasional enemies and useless crafting ingredients just scattered everywhere.
Well, yeah, but...
And let me guess, it also adds unnecessary stealth and an instantly summonable horse.
Are those bad things?
Not at all, if that's what you were in it for.
Good.
But don't confuse it for Dark Souls.
We need new video game genre names so badly.
Dark Souls is a Rubik's Cube, whereas Elden Ring is a scavenger hunt on a golf course.
See what we're reduced to? Elden Ring is Dark Souls in basically every way except the map is now a massive continent, and instead of finding keys and clearing objectives to navigate the world, you basically kill whatever monster or demigod happens to be in your way along a critical path to unlock more of the map one chunk at a time.
How is it that every single Dark Souls successor misses the most important aspect of the game?
But still, this is a huge undertaking, transitioning Dark Souls into a massive open world. Okay, well, modernized generic open world with lots of empty space haphazardly thrown between all the traditional game elements in hopes of disguising all the loading going on behind the scenes.
It's still Dark Souls at heart. You'll fight tough enemies, explore treacherous environments, and die over and over again, respawning at the new knockoff bonfires, which also serve to point the way towards your next objective.
So these are called grass?
No, it definitely says grace.
Then why do you gain enlightenment from touching it?
Grass it is.
So whenever you touch grass, you'll not only gain the ability to warp at almost any time to this new location, but there's also a good chance that you'll be able to see the direction the grass is pointing, gently guiding you towards the critical path.
Or that guiding light will actually lead you around corners toward the grass itself to help you touch it in the first place.
One thing this game's got loads of is boss fights, though there's quite a lot of repeats. And considering the fact that this game's almost completely open, you will almost certainly find them out of any intended order, making some outrageously hard and others disappointingly easy.
At least a third of the time, I'd brace myself stepping through the fog wall only to be immediately let down by a boss I'd already seen before. Or I'd one-shot them before I'd even get a chance to see their moveset. No, this wasn't some crazy optimized run. Far from it. This was my first sloppy playthrough dual-wielding halberds, which you can go watch in its entirety, shameless plug.
This also has the Dark Souls 3 problem where bosses are more of a spectacle than a threat you'd be slamming your head against for 30 minutes. He'd finish the live stream and completely forget any of the bosses that we faced and couldn't even tell you which ones were supposed to be important and which ones weren't.
Yeah, it was weird how I would effortlessly put down a boss in the ground and suddenly get gifted a unique boss item akin to a traditional boss soul. Each time I was like, oh, you were supposed to be important?
It also seemed that each boss had some sort of spammy instant win attack that completely threw off what would have been a fair fight. Each Dark Souls boss explores a new concept you have to brace with and overcome. Elden Ring just throws its 13th dragon at you and just buffs its attack and HP and calls it a day.
Not to gripe on the bosses, it's just that the ones that beat me up did so in seemingly unfair ways, when in Dark Souls it was always unique, fair, and challenging. And the rest were so forgettable I had to rewatch my own streams to remind myself who the NPCs in stream chat were even talking about.
Upside to being open world, there are huge caves, elaborate dungeons, and deep underground chasms that span most of the map. There's even unique enemies and items to find in practically every corner of the world, and that is awesome!
Oh yeah, I'm that weirdo who's looking at the undead abomination crawling at me out of a crypt thinking, wow, I haven't seen those animations or bone structures in any other creature in the entire game, instead of, zombies!
Downside to being open world, we've now got a cumbersome and rarely useful crafting system to justify picking up all the garbage scattered around the place, and a teleporting ghost horse existing solely to allow us to zip all over the empty space and lessen the monotony that comes with an open world.
Your stupid horse torrent feels good at first until you get into combat, or try some treacherous platforming, and then it suddenly feels like you're riding on a piglet in ice skates.
You'll get knocked off of Torrent easily and take massive critical damage when you do. And sometimes the dumb animal just randomly won't revive with full HP even after you rest. It's such a frustrating flighty show pony you'll quickly learn to abandon it in combat unless you like unfair one-hit kill deaths.
If Dark Souls is condensed and refined, Elden Ring goes wide, diluting itself with its own scale. Yes, there is cool stuff to discover, but it comes at the expense of the dense, intricately crafted level design that I personally crave in these games.
Yeah, it would take decades to properly develop the game at this scale. So to cut corners, areas are stuffed with the same lazy enemy placements you see everywhere. In large areas, patrolling enemies alert the others nearby to swarm you, and in tight spaces, it's always the same ambush after ambush.
It is genuinely fun for the first dozens of hours, but eventually you'll start to realize that the haphazardly arranged levels are all functionally the same, and nothing like the constantly evolving organic masterpiece that was Dark Souls 1. Hey, smashing face with a halberd in each arm felt great! Except for all the unfair boss AoE attacks and the monotonous horseback riding and the endless ambushes and that one frictionless rolling fat guy. So it was great except for all the parts that it wasn't. That about sums it up. You wanna know what's the best part of this game? No contest? It's the art style. The lands between are beautiful. Almost every area has its own color palette and visual flair with unique enemies found nowhere else. It's completely understandable to play this game solely for the visual spectacle alone. Then why is the same merchant copy-pasted all over the map with differently colored Santa Claus clothes as if we wouldn't recognize the fact that it's the same character model? Yeah, that's awful, but the disturbing, abominable creatures contrast perfectly with the magnificent allure of the fantastical landscape. Watching two colossal trolls impaled through their backs, chained to a train-sized black funeral carriage with the glowing lights of the Erd tree in the distance as its golden leaves flutter down around you. It's a work of art. At least the NPCs are still on point. We've got a talking warrior pot, omnipotent fingers, and a pope tortoise. Bring it on, I live for the crazy. You are known as a Tarnished, seeking great runes held by various powerful shard bearers in order to reconstruct the shattered Elden Ring and become the next Elden Lord at the base of the Erd tree. But what does any of that actually mean? I spent 100 hours in this game and I have absolutely no idea. Kinda sucks we never got any clear explanation for the most basic of elements to the plot, so I instead opted to watch hours of lore videos after beating the game so someone could explain to me what any of this was even about. But even after all of that, I still have absolutely no idea. Obviously this game is going to be told through context clues and item descriptions like before, and I'm cool with that. But when half of the names and locations sound just like other names and locations, it's no wonder you'll find yourself unnecessarily tangled up and confused. Melina and Malenia, Radon and Radagon, Godwin, Godric, Godfrey, goddamn, this is like the first thing you learn to avoid in any creative writing class. What really sucks is after spending all that time actually digging into the lore, I found out that everything basically boiled down to a petty Game of Thrones for demigods. Guess George R.R. Martin's stories are just about as various as his character names. Problem is, that's just not an interesting concept for lore when there is nothing to be intrigued by. Why did this character do this thing or fight us here? Well, they were fighting over the shards for the Elden Ring. Every single time. For lore to be interesting, there needs to be a reason for the players to be invested other than the basic curiosity of the game never explaining anything. You hear corny eye rollers like destined death and are still expected to take this pretentious crap seriously. So if you just play the game, you'll only end up confused. And if you look it up, you'll realize it was just Greek mythology as written by Edgar Allan Poe. Okay, this can't just be me, but I get this nails on a chalkboard feeling whenever I hear droning low-pitched strings instead of silence or ambiance. And unfortunately, if you're not in a boss fight, that is the entire soundtrack. Oh boy, do I feel bad for anybody who bought the OST. The first entire hour is nothing but monotone humming, stringy noise. It's like listening to somebody cut imaginary meat on a dinner plate when you're just trying to play a video game. The boss tracks are obviously the highlight, though I personally found this batch to be the most samey and forgettable in the series. Kind of ironic that all the music blends together in my head just like all the bosses and backstories and names, and this is one of the highest rated video games ever made, and I don't think either of us will be giving it a perfect score. It goes to show what a 10 actually means from us. Granted, that's coming from all the posers who praised Tears of the Kingdom, so it looks like nobody's track record for judging quality is unmarred. This truly feels like the first honest successor to Dark Souls we have ever gotten. Yes, a lot of that modern open world blah brings it down, but it is still at heart a magnificent game. On a technical and artistic level, this game is a masterpiece, let's not undersell that. But for the sake of a review, I'm gonna stick my nose right in its butt crack because a review isn't fair unless it's honestly judging every single aspect. Yeah, like some obscure stuff really sucks this time around, but the rest is great. Like how watching speedruns of the series is notoriously intense and nerve-wracking, but an Elden Ring speedrun is just a horse running for an hour between a few wrong warp exploits. If Dark Souls is a pool, then Elden Ring is an ocean, and that alone seems to give it the idea that now it's suddenly okay to piss where you swim. The positive gamer in me had an enjoyable enough ride with Elden Ring to summon a slightly tarnished 8 out of 10.
though it's a genuine marvel. It's the first Souls game I have next to no interest in revisiting. It's great for one massive playthrough that eventually overstays its welcome.
The critical gamer in me is unashamed to shatter the perfect perception of Elden Ring with a 9 out of 10. That's still a really good score, but look what I have to compare this to. This game is obviously the spiritual successor to Dark Souls, and if I'm comparing it to that, it's not a masterpiece.
But what do you think? Let us know how your positive and critical sides rate Elden Ring in the comments below.
Mindlessly conforming to the general consensus makes you a true dung eater, incapable of forming your own opinions. So broaden your horizons and touch some grass. Otherwise, you're just playing with yourself.
We've reviewed quite a lot of games so far, but which one's your all-time favorite?
Super Metroid.
Right, but what would you say about like 10 years ago?
Super Metroid.
15?
Super Metroid. Though I might have said Metal Gear Solid or Link to the Past, depending on my mood.
Okay, fine. How far back do we have to go before you played Super Metroid?
20-ish years?
Good lord.
I distinctly recall performing this mental exercise debating my favorite video game back then. I take this unnecessarily seriously.
No kidding.
And the answer may surprise you. Unless you read the title of the episode, right? Yes, because it wasn't just Yoshi's Island. It was Yoshi's Island for the GBA, the only system I had that could even play it at the time.
As opposed to this thing, right?
Yes, but is that real?
Is what real?
That's a, wait, what happened?
To what? You're going senile, Grandpa.
The unabridged full title of my favorite childhood video game was, quote, Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island Super Mario Advance 3.
That's a title?
Though the original was released on the Super Nintendo, the Game Boy Advance version cleaned up loads of little graphical and audio quirks, as well as added many new tweaks to the mechanics and gameplay, including 6 new unlockable stages.
Isn't it wild the hardware in this thing was more powerful than this thing?
I knew it! Where'd you get that?
Get what? Did you touch Fuzzy or something?
I am perfectly safe!
Don't touch Fuzzy, kids. Yoshi's Island may be called Super Mario World 2, but it's very much its own beautiful thing. Both games are 2D platformers with the goal of making it to the end of each level, and each have Mario in them. That's where the similarities end. The first map in Super Mario World was called Yoshi's Island, so I interpreted this game as happening in the same place, but in the past where the Mario brothers were infants. And that brings us to the main gimmick. Yoshi must safely deliver baby Mario to the next Yoshi in waiting at the goal ring in a Pony Express system to begin the next level. Outside of spikes, lava, or other one-hit kill traps, Yoshi is invincible. Instead of taking damage, he drops baby Mario, floating away in a bubble, and has to catch him quickly before he is snagged by Comex's toadies. The genius part is the timer that appears when you drop baby Mario is effectively your health, and will count back up to a maximum of 10 after rescuing Mario. So not only is this a revolutionary new concept for a health system, you can even raise this timer all the way to 30 by collecting stars and keeping Mario safe in every level. Yoshi is not Mario, so he's packing loads of extra abilities like flutter jumping, ground pounding, and eating his enemies with his long sticky tongue and turning them into eggs, which can then be chucked at with an aiming reticle anywhere on screen, clocking enemies, destroying hazards, and activating secrets. So you're pretty much an invincible powerhouse, protecting baby Mario in a huge game of keep away, but drop him for too long and his cries will catch the toadie's attention. Touch and catch him by any means, including your tongue, in order to save him. If that sounds too easy, well, some of the later worlds would like to say hello, but that's not all there is to the gameplay. You see, after you hit the goal
goal ring, you'll be given a score directly based on how many collectibles you snagged during that stage. Suddenly, the entire Mario format just got flipped on its head. This was never a thing before. Sure, we had Dragon Coins in World, but those just increased your already kind of meaningless score total. In Yoshi's Island, each stage will permanently display your best scores, turning every level into a mini arcade scavenger hunt, locating all 5 flowers, 20 red coins, and ending with a max of 30 stars. Now, if you're not tantalized enough into replaying stages for better scores, you're at least incentivized to find as many flowers as possible, as the ending goal ring will spin like a roulette wheel once you cross it, and based on how many flowers you found, you will have that many chances to enter a bonus minigame for extra lives. There are so many creative encounters, enemies, and boss fights, and even transformations that the game seems to never run out of fresh ideas. As a successor to Mario World, it's a huge improvement in almost every regard, except the map isn't really a map anymore. Now you just kind of select levels from a list of folders. But that aside, levels are bigger, more non-linear, more diverse, and more refined than in World. I can confidently say that not even Mario Wonder was as creative as Yoshi's Island, and we still haven't even gotten a satisfying follow-up to this game that was any more than fine. Woolly and Crafted Worlds were alright, but what were they smoking with Yoshi's story? Rolled leaves from the Super Happy Tree to make some Super Happy Blunts. I am still waiting on Super Mario World 3, and I haven't felt super happy since 1995! Where most games at the time looked like pixel barf, Yoshi's Island instead goes for a pastel hand-drawn aesthetic, where everything is cartoony and adorable. A tremendous amount of detail has gone into animating absolutely everything from the spinning island menus to the many one-off enemies and bosses you will encounter only once. If this game looks graphically better than the rest of the Super Nintendo library, that's because it's secretly packing a Super FX chip, allowing for extra processing power and basic 3D rendering. I was wondering when you'd notice. Anyway, this game is a non-stop visual treat. The backgrounds, the character sprites, the meticulous attention to detail, it all comes together like a brilliant work of art. I love how there's an order to all the colored Yoshis in each world. I love the storybook intro cinematic. I love the unique level sprites. I love the unnecessary details like the 3D animated butterflies in the foreground. I just love it! All of it! Most Super FX chip games opted for pre-N64 3D and kinda aged poorly as a result. But Yoshi's Island might just be the most advanced game for the console! That looks ridiculous. Here, just use this instead. You just had one of these?! All I'm saying is it looks more authentic than a box of Cheerios. You know General Mills ain't sponsoring this garbage. That's amazing! Oh, come on! Prepare for the most adorable origin story nobody asked for that still comes off as undeniably charming. The stork delivering the newborn twins Mario and Luigi gets attacked by Kamek, attempting to thwart a prophecy of these two babies one day destroying his king, baby Bowser. But the attack isn't a complete success. Kamek kidnaps Luigi, but Mario is dropped in the skirmish, falling all the way down to the beautiful Yoshi's Island, where he somehow doesn't die, and the Yoshis all decide to work together to reunite the two babies in spite of Kamek's intentions. Why they have to travel through the many treacherous lands and fortified castles along the way instead of just, walking around them is anybody's guess. But at least Yoshi isn't too chicken to go in castles this time. Every 4 stages you hit either a fort or a castle, each of which houses a boss that starts out as a regular enemy before getting transformed by Kamek's magic and warped into a huge monstrosity. Every single one of these amazing battles is a winner. They're all exciting, different, and fun to solve through combat. Eventually, you storm Kamek's keep and find baby Bowser in his padded nursery, who decides he wants to ride Yoshi all of a sudden and starts fighting you. And it's not until you defeat him that things start getting really crazy. Kamek is horrified by what you've done to his little master and does something drastic. He uses the same magic on baby Bowser that he'd used on all the other bosses. The room shakes as he grows to tremendous size. The castle is destroyed as Bowser rises from the rubble in the distance and starts stomping your way like Godzilla. The perspective of this fight shifts into 3D as Yoshi starts flinging huge eggs into the distance to land hits on Bowser as rocks and fire are hurled your way back in return. It's gotta be one of the coolest Bowser boss fights in the series, and it gets coupled with the best Bowser theme he's ever had. After destroying Bowser Kamek retreats with the defeated baby Bowser into the night, and Yoshi finally saves the captured Stork and baby Luigi, who are safely delivered to their parents across the Sea of Clouds, who we will never see again, as much as I want to see their mom and her goofy-looking SpongeBob pom-pom fingers return somehow. Their parents are obviously Link and Zelda. Nobody else in their right mind would hold newborn babies up over their head. Child Protective Services are just as imaginary as live childbirth in the Mushroom Kingdom. Alright, I've gone on about Koji Kondo being one of the greatest composers in history, but this is his best work. Yes, Yoshi's Island is Koji Kondo's magnum opus. I love that the GBA version added in all the adorable Yoshi sounds that we recognize today. They somehow made the game even cuter. Like, how'd they even do that? And I love how each world you clear adds a new instrument to the map theme, eventually coming together to make this triumphant piece encouraging you to keep going. And I love how touching a fuzzy not only warps the entire world around you into a dizzying drug trip, but it also shifts the music into a warbly contorted retake on the original theme of that level that transitions perfectly. They're not even the same tempos anymore. I do not understand how this works so well, but it does. And I just love this game. I love this game. Everything about it. Okay, maybe not how spastically unmanageable Poochie is. Everything. Any more people see Yoshi's Island as the real first Yoshi game, blissfully ignorant to the mediocre puzzle games that came before, and not as it was intended, a successor to Super Mario World. Yoshi for NES was best left forgotten anyway, though it's kind of amusing to go back and see why it was so disappointing. It was developed by none other than the industry clowns at Game Freak, long before Pokemon even existed. So let's just say there was nowhere to go but up. Now let me tell you that even with the mindset that Yoshi's Island was intended to be a sequel, and the fact that Super Mario World was already one of my favorite games, Yoshi's Island is so outrageously good that it might just be even better than World ever was. Those are some big words, but did you even play it on original hardware? I am not falling for this again. Okay, I know how weird you get with this system, just take it. It's kind of wrong that you haven't even owned one up till now anyway, you big weirdo. Not like you've got an old CRT component tube TV laying around to play it on anyway. The positive gamer in me had an absolute blast with Yoshi's Island, scoring it with a dazzling 10 out of 10. Somehow this sequel to one of the best games ever made is completely different, completely original, and completely worth playing on its own. The critical gamer in me had some initial doubts in asking, is Yoshi's Island really that good? Is it really on par with some of the greatest games ever made? Yes, Yoshi's Island is a work of art. Yoshi's Island is a masterpiece, and Yoshi's Island is an undeniable 10 out of 10. I feel like I'm surprised every single time we hit one of these reviews and it turns out to be another 10 out of 10 I was not expecting. But what do you think? Let us know how your positive and critical sides rate Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island, Super Mario Advance 3, in the comments below. Maybe I'm just nostalgic. Maybe I'm love-struck over the Super Nintendo. Maybe I touched fuzzy. But if you think loving video games for any reason is a bad thing, maybe you touched fuzzy. 'Cause you're just playing with yourself. No, Mom, I do not have a problem.